Good evening, everyone. The time is 5:39 p.m. I will call the meeting to order. I'll begin with roll call. Ms. Daniels? Here. Ms. Green?
Present.
Mr. Madsen?
Here.
Mr. Majors?
Here.
Ms. Rawls? Here. Mr. Rodriguez?
Present.
Ms. Bowers? I'm present. I would like to now turn the meeting over to our Budget and Finance Committee Chair and Vice President, Councilwoman Green.
Thank you very much, President Bowers. I believe we will start with the presentation from the administration.
We're going to start with the police commissioner. There are some questions that he is answering. Would you like me to read them for the record, Chief? Commissioner. The Police Bureau's CSA program. In relation to the CSA program, it was indicated there are duties of the CSA officers and goals for the program, which could you please provide this information? Additionally, a breakdown of the calls that the CSA responded to thus far. Early today, the HPD sent over the Community Service Aid Manual, which is in your packet. It's the thickest document in the back. And the job description, which is a little thinner right in front of that document. The CSA program has continued to increase in its core functions outlined in the CSA manual and has shown it's capable of moving forward at this time. Although the CSA program has gone through 3 different directors in the past 6 months, the CSAs have shown a unique ability to adapt each time, indicating they were hired to do a job, not to serve a specific director. And they will continue to do that job because they believe in the program. The CSA document activities within the Cody Records Management System, with that data being extracted and analyzed by division crime analysts. The data is available for future viewing. Based on the infancy of the program, quarterly evaluations are not yet available, but anticipate providing them in the future based on proceeding. Captain Hooper and Director Houston believe the program is ready to move on from the pilot program. And again, I do have the 2 documents in your packet. Were you able to locate them? I know it's a dense packet, so we just want to work with you to make sure everybody's able to locate what they need to have. May I go forward?
Are there any questions so far regarding the CSA program or the information that was sent out? As of right now, we can move on.
Thank you. The second question, please provide a detailed breakdown of everything that was budgeted with expectations of using funds from the American Plan Act. There has been the removal of the command van from the ARPA funding, and HPD has requested no other ARP money for supplies and services. There'll be a more detailed ARP discussion a little later unrelated to police. The budget amount in 2021 under 429001 was $167,608. Expenditures from this line were $72,335.42. The COVID pandemic canceled some courses and we were unable to attend. HPD also had 66 positive COVID cases in 2021, resulting in the cancellation of their attendance at some of these courses. Also, instead of paying for courses, we utilized courses that were free, such as from the Pennsylvania State Police or their counter drug training facility at Fort Indian Town Gap. Lastly, because of the shortfall of officers to work on the street, we had to cancel some course attendance to maintain personnel on the street.
Excuse me, can you please remember to speak into the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure, I'll be happy to do it.
Thank you.
Apologize.
Thanks.
I have kind of a big booming voice. So sometimes I don't need it, but I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Any questions on this response?
What is the
Councilman
cost?
Majors?
I'm sorry.
I believe
Oh,
Councilman
speak into
Majors
the-
does have a question.
I'll come back, no problem.
Are you sure? Okay, this is brief, so. What is the cause of the increase in the police budget line item 453004? Are we purchasing more vehicles? The appropriate request is for $1,446,664. We are pursuing grants money for the Bureau ATV, UTV, and command vehicle, not ARP. With the money, while this money is budgeted general fund and grants received would be reimbursing the general fund for costs incurred in the purchase of such vehicles. Otherwise, you see the vehicles that they plan on purchasing that are not in those two categories.
Okay, so I do have a question on this. So essentially this line is completely funded. If there were no grants available, these vehicles would still, everything would be purchased.
Well, of course, not the command vehicle and the ATV. So those two are exclusive, but the other two, yes. Is that correct?
No, they're funded.
I was gonna say they're fully funded. If you take that
Yeah,
out,
they're
it
fully funded.
Okay, I'm
goes
sorry.
down.
My mistake. Sorry. I just have a lot of notes, a lot of moving parts, so my apologies, please.
Okay, so no matter what, this year we plan on purchasing all of these vehicles. Any questions from the council regarding this line here? I can't say I'm in agreement with everything, but I don't have any questions on it. But Councilwoman Ross?
Can we explain a little bit more about what the command vehicle is and why the city needs it for us and for the public?
The command van is utilized when we have emergency situations, when we have events at the Riverfront City Island, at the farm show, any disaster or anything like that, anything that goes on outside the city where they would request city officers to respond to like help them out. If there's a prison breakout at Dauphin County Prison, we take our command van out there and stage it in the rear of 19th and Paxton Street. The command van should be equipped with phone lines, computers, restrooms, different things like that. Our command van is over 30-something years old. It's outdated. It barely works. So we need a more modern van. You know, if there is a hostage situation, we utilize that van when the CRT team comes in. Everybody's stage is right there, and we work out at their van right there. We needed one when we just recently had a major incident down on Front Street. We should have utilized our command van to be uniformed with the fire department and other emergency rescue personnel, but we didn't have one. And so we utilized our vehicles in the cold weather to get things done. And that's what their command van is used for.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I will add a follow-up question to that. I noticed it says lease to own, so $800,000 doesn't buy it.
I'm not sure what the asking prices are on those vans because they are costly. Anytime you talk about police equipment, it costs. Even our handcuffs cost an awful lot, you know, so it's very, very costly. So I didn't go out to price one to see how much, you know, that it costs. So, but the 800,000 was put in there, and we were hoping to get matching funds or what have you.
Okay, and so then we wouldn't know what the recurring cost is of the lease because we haven't priced that out. Since it's lease to own, if this was the initial down payment, we don't know how much it would be annually to keep leasing it.
I don't have that information, ma'am, no.
Councilman Rodriguez, I believe you had a question.
Yes, thank you first and foremost to the Fire and Police Bureau for coming out this evening again. Question, with the, just for the citizens watching, would that be considered the mobile substation that traditionally come out on Kennetenny once in a while, like a long time ago? Is that
Yes,
okay.
yes, we did utilize.
Does that require a certain license to drive, such as a CDL? And
Yes.
if so, are the officers equipped, or is there a specific someone who drives that?
We have officers that are certified to drive that vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions on this topic? I think we're okay to move on.
Now, I know you cannot read this. I don't expect you to. I just want to have this as a placeholder because you do have a copy in your packet. It's the actual job description for the CSA. But I thought I would put it in here as a placeholder and make sure that you had a copy that was much, much, much more legible. I don't know if you have any questions for the commissioner on the job description. I'll hold until you give me instructions. Go for it.
I only have one question as far as the job description. Is this the original job description we received last year, or have there been any updates?
Captain Hooper's here. He can answer that question.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I believe the question was, is this the original job description? Has anything changed? At this point, nothing has changed from the original one.
That's the only question I have. Any other questions on the CSA job description? Councilman Rodriguez?
I see that the CSAs will be allowed to use the Cody system. Is that a conflict with the FOP? And if so, how would they utilize that information?
They are currently utilizing the Cody system. It's not, we haven't bargained with the FOP at this point, but we don't suspect there be any issues. There's other programs throughout the state that utilize the CSA program that also utilize Cody. As well as in reference to Cody, how they're using Cody, they're just pretty much putting information in, using it more as a dispatch notes, notating what they did. That way everyone understands if they dealt with someone, and that information can be passed on to other officers.
Thank you for that. And then one more question. Initially, and even still currently, the program has mental health parts into it. What kind of training will the CSAs get to be qualified to give those services in the community?
So far, they've gone through several trainings. One of them has been the crisis intervention training, kind of what the co-responders do. It was actually given by the lead co-responder that does that type of training. We have some other things in place that haven't panned out yet. I shouldn't say panned out yet, hasn't come to fruition. We're still kind of in the onboarding process of some of those things because there's so many trainings involved. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions regarding the CSA job description or CSA program?
Yes, not relative to the job description, but the program. So last night I was asking questions relative to an evaluation of the program, just trying to get a better understanding of two things. If we're moving from a pilot program to a more formalized program, what constitutes the shift? Is it the increase in CSAs that's requested or something else? But I really want to get to the root of evaluating the program to date.
Okay. In reference to, I know you said shifting from a pilot to a more formalized program. I never really saw it as a pilot program, but basically they are already moving full force, moving forward. What kind of puts it all together is the agreement between the FOP and the city. Once that agreement is in place, everything they're doing right now will continue. And that just kind of reinforces that this is the program. This is the way it is. Now there's ability for things to grow in the future because this is brand new. A year ago today, this division was in its infancy. The CSA program wasn't even here yet. So it is brand new. So there's things that can happen in the future, but right now it's the program.
So I understand that it's new and it's still evolving, I guess we'll say. But to date, what metrics are you utilizing to evaluate the effectiveness of the program if it is not a pilot program?
All right, it's kind of unusual. The only way to really evaluate the effectiveness is, first of all, are they being utilized? And they are definitely being utilized. We'll just pick for instance, this month, in February of this month, February of this year, we've only been 8 days in and they've already handled 21 calls. And we look at like just the feedback from the officers as well, and how they're responding to this, and it's very positive. They're starting to understand that they can utilize these officers, these aides, they can utilize the CSAs for many purposes. I do have a chart, I'm sorry, I was forwarded, I guess, I'm not sure if it got to you or not, but. Okay.
It's in the back of our packet.
It should be still hot because it came in at 5:23.
It's hot off the press. There you go. So if you look at the one that's actually a bar chart, it states CSA call response by month. One of the things we had to take into consideration was that the CSA manual wasn't finalized until late October. I believe it was October 20th of 2021. There was also a timeline in there as well, if you wanted to follow any of that information. But it wasn't finalized until October 20th, 2021. And once that was finalized, that's when the CSAs were able to really focus on one thing. Obviously, we all know they went through several directors. And each time a new director came in, there was a new thought on how to reach the final goal. So there was always this orientation portion that was always happening. So when you look at this bar graph, I mean, August, September, October, I mean, yeah, they were handling things, but those were more like contacts, some community, making contacts with some of the community people. It's just random things like that. In November, halfway through November, once we kind of figured out what we really want to focus on, you can see they started to handling some of these calls. Now, if you look in your manual, in the CSA manual, the way to respond, you want me to wait for that? Or do you want me to just keep talking? The way that CSAs respond is basically police dispatch. When I say police dispatch, I don't mean county dispatch. I mean the officers themselves would request the CSA to either assist them with the call, or can they handle a call, or hey, there's a call in the system that's waiting to be dispatched. Can you handle that call? And the reason why we did that was based off of other programs throughout the country in reference to allowing the officers to buy in as well. Because if the CSA starts handling calls, you know, sometimes the officer would be like, wait, you're stepping on my toes. What are you doing? This allowed that. So in November, when this manual rolled out, it was rolled out to the police as well. And so they too had to start to understand that we had these CSAs here, we need to start utilizing them. It's still a process because it is new. So in November, yes, there's 14 calls. We kind of went through halfway through the month. Obviously, you had Thanksgiving. You had some things going on. Had some people suffered from some pandemic issues. But once December kicked in, and as you can see, they're starting to be utilized more. You can see that the police officers are starting to get used to calling them out. So the CSAs can't just run out and start handling calls. So December went up to 50, January's 48, but already in February, we're already, like I said, we're already at 21, and we're only 8 days in. The officers themselves appreciate this program. The community, the feedback that we have gotten from the community has been positive. One person actually asked, why isn't there more? And I know there's some question about some people haven't seen them. Yes, there's only 6 of them. And yes, we're still in the program. We're still in the infancy, and they're still trying to get out and trying to figure out where to do sometimes with some of the things, because they're doing business registries, trying to get all the inner city business put it all in one place. They're doing business checks. So not everyone's going to see them right now, but the ones that have seen them and have come across them, from my experience, it's been very positive. So that's kind of like the metrics for now, the amount of calls that they're utilizing, and the feedback from the community and from the officers.
Thank you. I guess moving forward, I would like to see something in writing relative to a continuous evaluation of the program before 5 or 6 new people are added.
Are there any other comments or questions regarding the CSA program? Councilman
Yes,
Rodriguez?
thank you. When an officer, I guess, determines that they would need a CSA help, is that something just based off of their own individual needs at the time, or is there a scope of specific things that CSAs can and absolutely cannot go to?
Well, if I understand your question, when an officer dispatches, are you saying, does the officer know or?
What would require, I'll rephrase it, what would require an officer to call upon a CSA for assistance? And the second part to the question is, are there any guidelines that would restrict a CSA from going at any call regardless?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, what would, in reference to the officer, basically, it's been our experience that the officer is calling CSAs for calls that they, based on their own experience, know are not police-related calls. Just, these are calls that police have just started to take on because we were the answer to everything. So that's kind of been my experience. Those are the calls that have been calling. Now, we do have the 7 qualifications, the 7 things that we indicated. It's in the manual, and it's also elsewhere throughout. I believe it was in one of the responses. But there's 7 things, 7 categories that they handle. The CSAs understand those 7 categories because it's something we kind of drill all the time. If it's something that's not sure if it's within those 7 categories, let's say an officer calls them for something, and officer says, hey, can you handle this? And they go out there and they're like, well, hold on, I'm not really sure where we're at with this. One thing they can do, and what they're supposed to do, is contact myself and ask me, hey, Captain, this is what we have. And then I'll give them some guidance on what my opinion based on what we have established in the manual. But then there's other times when they get out there and they let the officer know, hey, listen, this isn't something that we can handle based on the guidance in the manual.
Just for reference for the residents watching, what would you consider, just an example or two, what is not a police call?
Which is not a police call? Let's use one of the calls, it seems like one of the ones that are called the most is starting to really come around, are what's called non-reportable accidents. Non-reportable accident is considered that because it's exactly what it is. According to PennDOT, an accident that doesn't have injury or doesn't require vehicles to be towed or anything like that do not have to be reported to PennDOT. They do not have to be investigated by the police. That's why they're called non-reportable. So what we found that over the years is that kind of went back and forth. Should we respond to these non-reportable accidents? Should we not respond, based on manpower and everything else? And when you don't respond, then you have people who are legitimate citizens that are sitting there waiting for the police because in their mind, you have to wait for the police, And then there's also, then the police don't show, and then it becomes a black eye on the police because they don't understand that this is not something that we have to do. So with the CSA program, now when you have these non-reportables, not only do you have someone showing up that's going to facilitate the exchange of information because that's all that's required in an accident like that, but you also have someone that's representing the city and they're showing up right away. So you don't have them waiting 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and then finally going home because there's a major incident. You're welcome.
Are there any other questions regarding the CSA program?
I do have 3 more slides for the CSA program.
Okay, thank you.
May I proceed? Captain Hooper, I don't know if you want to discuss the CSA timeline at all,
Yes, I can.
please.
Okay, some of this is going to be redundant because I kind of spoke about some of this earlier, but the CSA program falls under the Community Services Division. The Community Services Division became in existence February of last year, of 2021. Prior to that, this was not in existence. I was not a captain, I was a lieutenant, and I was promoted, and here we go with the Community Services Division. One of the thoughts was that we were going to start this Community Service Aid Program, or the CSA program. Time went on, there's interviews and other things that had to take place, but the first, if you look, they're numbered, there's 1, 2, each circle is numbered, so you can kind of keep it in order. It's 1, 2 at the bottom, then up 3, 4, it goes up and down. So number 2, the CSAs are finally hired July 26th of 2021. Right after that is National Night Out. So what happened, and then one of the first things that happened was they were hired, they were brought in, and they were immediately funneled to National Night Out. Unfortunately, there was a National Night Out, it's August 3rd. Unfortunately, it was not time to do onboarding and everything else. We needed this CSAs, this to be their first time interacting with the public, with the community. So on August 9th, that's when their onboarding began. Some of the training, and there's some stuff in a couple of slides behind. There's some training and stuff, but that's when that began. Unfortunately, 2 weeks after that, August 27th, Director Lynch resigns. So now we have no director, a new program of people that just started 3 weeks in, and now they have no direction. And then September 1st, we had a new director, which was Anna White. Anna White came in, she had her view on how things should be handled. And so now the CSA program kind of took a shift from its initial onboarding, August 9th, to now almost a new onboarding and a new direction, even though the goal was the same. So after that, like I mentioned, they started doing that. I was working on myself and Director White was working on the CSA manual because we knew we had to hone this into what they're actually going to work on for the FOP to be able to look at this and say, this looks good, this doesn't look good, or however they're going to approach that. The manual was finished October 20th, near the end of October. Then we jumped to CSAs begin handling calls, kind of like I said, in November. Once the manual was looked at, kind of agreed upon in a formal way, they started handling calls in November. The next thing happened was Anna White was released. So now once again, so December comes around, Anna White's released, and now it's kind of like everything's kind of, I don't want to say goes to a halt, but it's like, okay, we got to collect ourselves and see what we're going to do now, how we're going to approach this. I had to step in and kind of take over from that point on. One of the first things we did was on January 3rd, we had already talked about this, but we established permanent shifts. So there's 6 CSAs from right now. And there's 3 teams. There's 2 CSAs per team. The first team, it's kind of, I put that in one of my answers. The first team works 8 to 4. The second team works 10 to 6. And the last team works 12 to 8, which gives CSA coverage from 8 to 8, Monday through Friday. That's where we're at right now based on the amount of CSAs we have. So even the numbers that was provided, that's not even a 24-hour schedule. That's just a 12-hour schedule. So we started established that. And then January 10th, the new director, Chardan Houston. Sorry about that. I apologize. Chardan Houston came on board. And once again, we have to, under her direction, take another way of approaching the same outcome. So, and that's where we're at right now.
May I proceed to the next slide?
Any questions on the timeline before we proceed? Right.
They're kind of interrelated, that's the only reason. This is a list of their community outreach and engagements. As you can see, you've heard them talk about the National Night Out, which was a huge success on August 3rd of 2021. The Dauphin County Cultural Festival, 100 men and women back to school day, Latino Heritage Festival, the Coat Drive, Capital Rebirth anti-bullying event, Brethren Housing, City Council's annual Trick or Treat Bash, Holiday Parade, Shop with the Cop. This is kind of cute. New Year's Eve celebration, Block Barbecue, Public Works Department, Community Canvassing, Safe Walk Home Program, Crime Watch meetings, active shooter training, business checks, and downtown daily bread, and also initiated an inner city business directory. And that's their that was their outreach and engagements for the year. Or well, some of it crossed over into this year.
Any questions on this slide? You may proceed.
Thank you. And then this one again is a little hard to read. I kind of got it a little bit late, so I had to do the best I could to get it into your programming. So the.
Just as a note, council members, it is on your computers and in your email address.
Oh, good. Would you still like me to go over it then? Okay, thank you. So for trainings, of course, we talked about the Cody reporting management system training, CPR first aid and AED critical training, crisis intervention, de-escalation tactics, defense tactics, Narcan use, new hire scenario training, OC certification, power DMS, stop the bleed, and traffic control. And then to complement that, there's some orientations, abandoned vehicle units, animal control units, vice units, codes enforcement, central booking, CP, HUD units, DEMA, K9 units, parking enforcement, Parks and Recreation Department, patrol ride along, roll calls, public works, sanitation, traffic safety unit, and traffic engineering department.
Any questions on this slide?
Yes, I have a question relative to the pending trainings. It looks like there are 4 that are pending. When do you intend to have the CSAs participate in those? What quarter of the year?
We want it done in the first quarter. For instance, the CPR training, that's going to be done before the end of this month. So hopefully next week. But yeah, our goal is to have this completed as soon as possible. This isn't something we want to stretch out. It's just that unfortunately, due to different reasons, whether it's pandemic related, whether it's holiday related, weather related, that we kind of had to marry up with other people's schedules.
Okay. And the orientations that were shared, they've all been completed?
Yes, ma'am.
Once the trainings and the orientations have been completed, is there documentation that the CSAs receive noting that they've completed the Cody report management system training on X date?
There's, and unfortunately, when we first started some of this onboarding, some of this did happen under the Blake Lynch era. Some of this, we was bringing people in, and like I said, it was a new program, and there was some lag in getting the documentation for some of these things. But a lot of these, yes, there is the documentation, but there are dates and stuff that indicate that they were done. There's certificates for some of these things. And that's one of the things, even speaking with Director Houston, we are going to make sure we have everything. We have paperwork or trail for everything that we do. So for the next group that comes on, they can do the exact same thing with the exact same people and have the exact same outcomes.
Okay, and just to follow up on the 21 calls that were received to date.
Yes.
What was the nature of those calls outside of the non-reportables?
I have a breakdown of the calls. Unfortunately, I have a breakdown of all the calls from throughout the graph. I don't have the number from this month, the exact numbers, but if you need the exact numbers for the 21 this year, I can probably get that to you guys.
I was just curious the nature of the calls, that's all. Like what they entail.
There's other slides I believe that we'll get into that show all the nature of all the calls.
Okay.
Any other questions before we proceed? Councilman Rodriguez?
Just more of a statement. I noticed the trainings, they look great, by the way. Would there be any considerations for cross-training for other parts of public safety in the future?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. And I forgot to mention that. I know Chief Edeline had spoke with myself in reference to using the CSAs for fire prevention safety. And we were right on board with that, and I'm looking forward to that opportunity and anything else that arises. Like I said, it's new. So if something comes up, we're more than happy to get some training.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Ross?
Yes, I was wondering, with the calls that you get, especially mental health calls, what is the follow-up procedure that you all have for those calls or any calls? What is the follow-up?
It depends. It depends on the call. I know you mentioned mental health calls. Mental health isn't something that's so much theirs. That's more of the CIT program, the co-responder program. Not saying they won't come across things like that, but their follow-up is, it just depends on what the call is all about. Whether it's, let me call this person back, let me direct you to the proper department or proper agency that can assist. Maybe it's case management, maybe it's a code situation. So that becomes their follow-up kind of, they direct them and then they can reach back out to see whatever came of that, what has happened with that incident.
Thank you.
You're
Any other
welcome.
questions before we proceed? Are there more CSA slides after this?
No, because those were included in my place, it might be in your other package, but everything that was covered last night would have been what he preferred.
Okay.
Unless you'd like me to go over it again.
Yeah, I just had a specific question, but I wanted to wait till sort of we were done with the whole.
Yeah, we're going on to fire in the next slide.
Okay,
From
I guess-
here, sorry.
so I'll just throw out my question. Right time to throw it out there. But I know looking over the police budget yesterday or last night's meeting, we had talked about it's going to be a while till we get to folks being able to, or officers being able to walk a beat. What would it take for, do you think CSAs, I know they're not first responders, but I do think folks in the community would like to see someone walking around from time to time that they could engage with and talk with about public safety issues. What would it take, I guess, to get to that place? Is that something that you envision CSAs doing?
Better weather, that's all it will take. Director Houston and I, we've already talked about that. And it has been expressed to the CSAs that are already working, that is something that we want, like walk these areas, walk the neighborhoods, drive around, get out, walk, talk to people, just, that's what you're there for. I know a lot of times they talk about the CSAs are a bridge the gap between the police and the community. Well, that's just one of the bridges. It's to bridge the gap between the city and the community. So as they walk around, there's so many things they can talk about and so many things they can address. So the only thing that's going to take is walkable weather.
Okay.
Did
So that is
I answer
something-
your question?
Yeah, so it's something we are looking at doing. If the weather
Absolutely.
turns a little bit better, we'll
Absolutely.
utilize them in that fashion. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have another question. So I found the colorful pie chart. So it notes the CSA call types from August 16th, 2021 through February 8th of 2022. So just for the public's benefit, it notes that 26% of the calls received. Could you clarify if those were business checks or other? The colors, the navies look the same, so I don't remember which is which.
The 26% that's for business checks.
Okay. And so the other would be the 2%,
Yes.
which might be what would be included in that other category.
It's hard for me to say off the top. Okay, matter of fact, what's it called? When you give someone a ride, a courtesy ride.
Okay.
It can be an elderly person and you give them a courtesy ride. That can be something like that they have done.
Okay. Let's see. So 23% are quality of life calls. 1% is relative to a city ordinance. Would that be the noise ordinance?
It could be noise or it could be trash.
Okay.
It could be anything in reference to violates the city ordinance. Usually it's a code violation usually.
Okay. We have 8% community outreach. 24% traffic accidents. 14% are parking complaints. And then the other 2% are traffic control.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that we did have that information.
Any other questions from my colleagues? Councilman Majors?
Yes,
Go ahead.
Captain.
I was going to say, we got the breakdown for the calls for February, if you still would like that.
Yes, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. Looks like there were 5 business checks, 2 quality of life calls, 8 non-reportable accidents, 5 parking complaints, and 1 traffic control.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, just wanted to note, not regarding CSAs, but police, since I know we're going to be moving on to fire. I know last night, President Bowers asked about the diversity complement. Can someone speak to that
Oh, it's in your packet, by the way.
for the public? I mean, I
Oh,
know
for
we
the
asked it,
public.
but
Oh, sure.
that this is, I mean, unless you want me to read it,
No, I'll be happy to do that. I just wanted to make sure you knew you had it. I'd be happy to do it. Are you ready? Okay, very good. The diversity compliance for the police department are as follows. There are 130 sworn officers in the HPD. All sworn officers include command. There, in terms of race, there's 110 white officers, 12 Black or African American, 6 Hispanic, and 2 Asian. In terms of male and female, there's 115 male and 15 female. In terms of those that are bilingual, there's 7 that speak Spanish, 2 that speak Arabic, and 1 that speaks French. Of the sworn officers, 6 are police management, 5 are lieutenants, 9 are sergeants, 81 are patrol officers. Says I removed 1 person from the patrol number since yesterday, an officer left for another department. 17 detectives and 4 forensic investigators.
yeah, thank you.
Would you like me to do the sworn officer positions in the budget?
No, so, and that was going to be the next question. So that's about the current complement that we have now. So we are at, so with that, are we still, I have to do quick math. Are we now at 129 because of the loss of the officer yesterday? Or are we at 130? 130 is a complement.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we are looking to get to 157 is what, all right.
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And then we have, okay, I'll have to back the CSA's numbers out. Just looking at the bargaining unit. So the bargaining unit in our budget includes folks that aren't a part of the sworn officer. So I'll just make sure all my numbers are added up.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that's all I have for the current moment.
All right, I do have a couple of questions here regarding the police, but they are more towards the administration. One, can we get a potential salary for the new unfunded positions in the police department? For example, the community service division supervisor, there's no salary listed. Obviously, there wasn't an ending salary, and since it's not funded, there's not a salary either.
You want it? I can give that to you?
Yes, if you have it available.
Right. Yeah, that's a management position at 55,000.
Thank you. Another question is, do we plan to not fill the several positions that are not funded in this budget? Looking at the police department, there were several officers not funded in this budget. Are we not going to hire them this year? They were like zeroed out and obviously no money, no job.
I agree. I think it's a question. That's
It
a
may
great-
be more for the administration. I think it's more for the administration. It's just regarding the police. But so Dan, you might be able to answer that a little more clearly.
Yeah, as it stands right now, if there's no, so for example, I'll look at the police lieutenant here on page 82. There are 2 vacancies right now, and like neither of those would be filled as it stands right now. But also do keep in mind with some of these trainees, they will eventually be bumping up into a different classification. So we do need to be mindful. It's the same thing with fire, that there are classification changes throughout the year.
Understood. Do we have to have, are we meeting the number of positions required by contract to be funded? Like, in the contract, don't we have to have, aren't we agreeing to have so many officers?
As far as I know, yes, but Neil,
So if we don't fund a position that's agreed to by contract, does that position count as a non-existing position? So for instance, if we don't fund 10 police officers, but say that we have positions for all these officers.
It's coming up, so there's a microphone. There is no provision in the FOP contract for a guaranteed number of positions. There is the schedule for payments depending on what position you have and the rank in terms of the number of years of service are there, but there's no guaranteed minimum number of positions. So if a position is not funded or a position is added, that is a management decision. As long as it's, as you go. I think it was alluded to that there is a plan to come forward as the year goes on how to utilize funds to fill more positions. But as of right now, that position is there, so you can see the need of the police bureau, the difference between that need and what the current funded positions are. And you know that the police have had a challenge keeping all those positions filled and that's an ongoing national challenge. But as I understand the number of positions there, that is the police showing you, these are the officers we need in the bureau. And I think if those officers come through the process, the administration and the police will be back to council saying we have candidates, we'd like to fund them. And that could happen at that time. Did that answer your
Okay.
question?
Yes, that did answer that question. I have another question. So looking at the budget, I don't know if it's because it's management or why, but it looks like for some positions, a good bit of them, the annual increase is listed as 0, but it's an obvious increase between the ending year salary and the budgeted salary. Is there a reason why? Or is that just a clerical error?
Give us a
So
specific
if we say
example.
page 82, we've got police commissioner, deputy police chief, police captain, uniform patrol, police captain, director of community. It's like the first chunk and then the first 3 lines of the next one, which 2 of them are new, so that makes sense.
Marita can explain it a little bit more. There's a formula that goes along with increases in those positions. It's not like a set. Marita, if you can explain.
Yeah, I'm trying to,
Okay, maybe I'm reading it wrong. It just says 2022 annual increase, and it says 0.
Yeah, there's a formula.
yeah, the annual increases are based on the contract and the way the contract is read. And the newer officers get a large bump up. I mean, you guys might be able to explain it better than me even, but fortunately or unfortunately, the other officers get a smaller bump up.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think I understand that part. For the ones going further down the line, it looks like it's like a pretty obvious number as to what the increase is. And for them, the increase is 0. I would think that maybe the grade step increase is what relates to like their number of years. And then this, at least reading it, maybe from a non-budget person standpoint. But it just looks like it's 0, a 0 increase when there's.
Yeah, they're not
$14,000
0
number.
increases, actually. There was a negotiation with the mayor to increase the salary for these people, and so they don't get the rank and file, the bargaining unit increases.
Mhm.
Sometimes they do, like in the case of management non-uniform,
Mhm.
like in my department, there's a 2% increase. But in these cases, the mayor negotiated some specific increases for these commanding officers.
Right, I remember.
And some of it was to bring them into the same, with their competing communities, to bring them into a more formal, more realistic salary of where they really should be. So apologies for not having a little footnote there to explain that to you, but.
Right, I mean,
Yeah,
my
that's,
question, so, or my concern wasn't so much the increases. I can't say I really disagree with the increases. It's more for transparency purposes. On a quick glance, it looks like there was no increase. But if you actually look at the two numbers, you see that there's, 14,000, that there was an increase. But looking at it, it looks like there was no increase.
and that's the reason why, because normally that increase is a statutory percentage. In this case, it was a lump sum. I didn't really have a category for the lump sum, but we can do that in the future, certainly. And we'll make a note of that.
I think that's the last question I have. Are there any other questions from my colleagues regarding the police department as a whole?
I had a question, well, to back off of Vice President Green, there is a lump sum section. Are you able to put the
Well, I use
increase
the
there?
lump sum is, I'm sorry, lump sum is actually a technical term in the contract. It's more of a
In salary increase?
it's just a boost in their salary, and there's really no way to easily classify it, but perhaps we could work with you as the finance chair is to have some better, these are kind of older schedules that we inherited. I'm not making excuses for myself. I'm just saying we inherited these, and some of them have been used since I was here many years ago. So we really do need to, that's one of the things we talked about wanting to do, is have better budgeting, more appropriate budgeting, more accurate budgeting. And it's just going to take some time to work through some of these old schedules. As you know, we lost the budget manager on December 30th. So we couldn't even interpret everything that she had intended for us. So.
Okay, thank you.
And then I guess just one more point. I know I said I was done, but I'm back. One more point, looking at the reference guide that you all provided to us, it looks like between the budget submitted last week and the amended exhibit submitted this week, it's about a $500,000 increase in the police budget. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I just wanted to make note of that for the public. Any other questions or comments from our colleagues? All right, thank you very much for making yourself available today. It's appreciated. All the work that you do is appreciated. So have a great evening, and thank you again.
Thank you, ma'am.
I believe we're ready.
Okay, so one question from last night was define the demographics for the Bureau of Fire. The total, and this is minus one person, and that is our administrative assistant to the fire chief, who's a female, is not included. This is all uniform personnel. So out of 89, 75 are white, 7 black, 4 Hispanic. We have no Asian, 2 Native American, none that are undefined, and 1 female. And for clarification, I know there was a public comment last night, and I just wanted the public to understand that it dealt with military and our lack of military in the Bureau of Fire. And actually, out of those numbers, out of the 90 total that we have, 89, I'm sorry, excluding our administrative assistant, 33 of those have served in the United States military. So we have 33 veterans that not only fought for our country and defended our country, but they're here defending our citizens. That's about 36% of the Fire Bureau has at least 4 years graduated out of that branch of the military. Some are still actively serving, and as I said last night, we have 2 that are on long-term deployment for military service, 1 in the Air Force and 1 in the Army. Interestingly, when I looked at that, so 36% of the Bureau has some kind of background in the military. when you look at the private sector, it's usually about 5.6%. So I wanted to look at fire departments. We look at the biggest fire department in the United States, the FDNY has 11,000 plus members. They only employ 12.7% military. So we are nearly triple of the largest fire department in the United States when it comes to military veterans, and we're very proud of that.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the fire department? Councilman Madsen.
Yeah. I know in the past we've had a diversity and inclusionary officer. Have you worked with that person? I know there's been a few, I've been on council, but I believe it's vacant now currently, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Whenever we get a new one, have you worked with any diversity and inclusionary officers in the past on this issue and just kind of going over best practices? And I guess if we get a new person, would you be willing to work with them?
Absolutely, and that's something that, we don't like to single out police or fire. We like to say that we're public safety and we work together as a team on that. Even though our jobs are a little different, they're still number one, serving the public. And so that is definitely important to us working with them. And you're right, there was a large turnover multiple times in that division. And I think that there's things to learn. One of the things that we learned, as the chief alluded to last night, was the use of the bus stops and the signage. So that was something that we got from some discussions with how do we better reach the community. We implemented it. We obviously saw a little bit of an increase, so now they're going to do it with their current process of advertising for police department positions. So I think we're learning as we go along. It's no longer the, hey, come join us. We got to give them a lot more than that. And I know that the police were with us at an event 4 years ago at the high school. We personally handed out, I personally handed to 20 different high school students, seniors that were graduating, the application packet. We held off the application deadline for the graduations if they were graduates. Of those 20 that we personally handed out and waived the $50 fee, we got 0 back. And so that was a total disappointment to us in the fire department. So that was a learning point for us. And I think that, going forward, we definitely need to learn a little bit more, and having somebody in that diversity office will help and assist with some of those things to see what the trending opportunities are across the country. And that's quite frankly what we did with the advertising we did this last time. It was fairly successful.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the fire department?
In your packet is a very brief overview of the proposed job summary and some of the essential functions for the deputy chief of training. This is obviously a very rough draft, work in progress, to get us to that June, July timeframe to hire.
I believe everyone.
Thank you
is
for
fine.
sharing that.
You need a copy, Mr. Matson? I do have an extra. Oh, you're good? Okay.
Are there any questions or comments regarding this? Seeing none, I would like to say thank you for making yourself available tonight. Thank you for providing this. It's great to be able to look over it. We appreciate all of the work that the fire department does. As you know, I personally had a fire this year, and you guys didn't know it was my house, that it was my house, but you were jolly on the spot. You guys were putting the fire out before I even knew the fire was there. So I would like to say thank you personally, and then thank you just for the work that you do.
You're welcome. You're absolutely welcome.
I want to piggyback off of that too, because I had the same issue. I had a fire in my house, and before I was in total shock, but you all showed up. Regardless, I don't even know who called because I was in shock the whole time, but you all put it out very quickly and showed up quickly. So thank you.
Thank you. That is the quality work of not me. It's the firefighters on the street to do a tremendous job day in and day out.
Thank you.
I believe we will be moving on to the codes department next.
Okay, very good. The Codes Bureau, in regards to a searchable database for items such as permits and violations, the reason the original forms are available through Right to Know as opposed to available via public search is because there are pieces of information on the original forms that must be removed or redacted. With a data migration onto a new platform, we will work with our vendor, once selected, to see what open data capabilities we might have. And some of these new products, these ERP products, have some really good modules that you may find very helpful. And I'm sure Mr. Bortner will discuss that later. As it relates to 2 vacant positions, the confidential secretary's request from the Bureau for a position that would serve as an office manager. While we don't plan on filling or funding it right now due to leadership transition in codes and city, it is something that was a request and an item that we would like to fund at a period later in the year or next year. The other council position, a research analyst, was accidentally posted in the from the city council's budget.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding this for the codes department? Seeing none, we can move on to the next slide.
And the next slide, you had asked for a copy of the job description for the administrative office manager. I have it embedded in this PowerPoint instead of a separate document. If you'd like me to, I could read it. It's up to you.
I think that we are okay not reading it unless someone has a request for it to be read. And then are there any questions regarding this? Councilman Majors?
Yeah, just, okay, so the noted, will that change? I guess we'll, in a finalized budget document, since everything's officially going to be, I guess, proposed tomorrow, you'll note and remove the position as proposed, so it'll.
It's been removed since then.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right,
so we apologize. There's a lot of moving parts.
okay.
Thank you for noting that.
Any other questions? I think we're okay to move to the next slide.
Very good.
Can I ask the individuals under administration, deputy, to just come closer to the table here? So next round of questioning they may be a little bit closer. All right, so as it relates to business development, the question was the salaries and wages in the Bureau of Business Development is cut by more than half. Have salaries dropped or are their positions being cut? In the original budget submitted, the unfilled Director of Economic Development position was not filled or funded. In the amended budget submitted, we decided to include funding for the position rather than potentially look at the ARP funding for that. Does anybody have any questions as it relates to that position being put back in?
I do have a question. So when do you intend to fill the role, or is that not happening?
There's negotiations. There's talk right now of that potential line of work being moved into or swallowed by another area of the city that we're working through right now, being by building and housing. We're working through that through the budget process, and a lot of it will depend on what gets passed with this budget funding wise.
Okay.
I guess then to that point, I apologize. I apologize, Chair Green. are we comfortable with one person doing both roles? That's, I mean, if you're talking about potentially folding it into another area, so we potentially have one person over building and housing and economic development.
Yes, Mayor has reviewed that, and that is where she's heading towards that.
Have we ever done that in the past? Have we, I mean, I know we've, over the last year, we were dealing with a lot of vacancies. We had people serving in multiple roles because the ship was a little lighter. But in terms of trying, have we had it as a, I don't know, historically as a role that was served by one person over an administration?
If you recall, Jackie Parker,
Okay,
development oversaw a whole giant swath of departments. So,
that was under a different organizational structure.
correct. But
Okay,
you're asking if the positions can be melded by a mayor. You know, that happened where there was only 4 departments instead of 7. She oversaw Parks and Rec. She oversaw development. She oversaw all the things she oversaw. It was a lot.
right, but there were, okay,
I'm just, but to your question, so that
Right,
was a
right,
model. So
right.
So
Okay,
how is the salary then determined?
I guess since I was here then. That salary originally was specially determined because it was funded originally by outside money. And then it pared down over a 3-year period. So it eventually in the 4th year became fully funded by the city. And I believe, but I am not positive that all or most of her salary was eventually funded. I don't think it's all of it from CDBG money, just like the administrative staff she oversaw there. You have to, with the federal money, you can't mingle. You have to show the duties of the job are related to what they're giving us money for. So, you know, and we've had employees, I think, the Freed administration who had salary portions out of both, but you do have to keep a track of it under the federal program. They don't prohibit that you have both, but you have to keep track of the percentage of work that is under the federal for audit purposes and the percentage that's under the general fund salary.
No, thank you for clarifying. I wanted to ensure that we were clear that we're dealing with federal funds for potentially both of these roles.
I think it's merely a structural issue at that point and an accounting issue.
Thank you.
Councilman Majors, do you have any other questions?
well, no, I mean, I guess I'm really then just looking forward to whatever a new organizational chart will look like, because every time I've looked at a different document, there's new positions, there's some things we're talking about getting there's new positions being funded, some not being funded, where everything's going to fall. I know you guys said maybe a few months we'll see a new organizational chart, but it's sort of hard to wrap your head around all of this, all going on at the same time. You know, new Department of Health, potentially this. So just look forward to being able to make sense of it all moving forward.
That will be part of the plan. 6 months, she wants to hold off major changes to any of our departments. So right now, what we're looking at doing is somebody serving in a temporary fashion before we would formally put in front of you something to vote on as it relates to that. And then obviously, as we get a little bit further into these slides, we'll explain some of the other stuff we're looking at.
Any other questions in regards to this slide? I think we are okay moving on to the next one. No promises that we won't come back.
So the next question for administration is dealing with IT. Mr. Bortner is here to be able to answer that. The question is, I noticed the IT department has a large increase in the line item 425090 for maintenance service contract. What's the reason for such a large increase?
So there were about 11 items that were part of the increase. 4 of them were pretty significant. One of them was Microsoft licenses for $177,000. The renewal of our Meraki cameras, the wireless access points and the switches There's 149 devices that go into that category, which is 58,000. The mainframe software maintenance renewal went up by 16,215. And then our mobile device management software went up by 15,600. That's really a reclassification from one account to another. And it did go up pretty significantly because we added all the police cell phones last year. And then there were, as I said, 7 other minor items that amounted to the rest of it.
Thank you. I do have a question about the Microsoft licenses. Is that an increase in the price of the Microsoft licenses, or are there more licenses, or are they like annual renewals?
These are licenses where we did some auditing of what we were paying for, realized some of these we should have been paying for but weren't. So we want to get back in compliance with them and make sure that we are current with the payment of those licenses. It's for Microsoft SQL Server, Windows Server, Visio, and a couple of other products that make up that total.
Any other questions? Council President Bowers?
Thank you, Vice President Green. Good evening, Mr. Bordner. I do have a few questions relative to IT. So can you please provide a tentative timeline of migration for the mainframe?
So in the month of January, we had Edmunds and Tyler Technologies in here for demos. They lasted pretty much the entire day. We have not had a chance to regroup internally to see what the feedback was and figure out the direction we want to go in. I talked to Dan a little bit about this at a meeting on Monday. So once we get back together, we'll have a better feel for what direction we're going in. If it is Tyler, a lot of the legwork's already been done with the contract. If it's Edmunds, that timeline basically starts over for contract negotiations, which could take several months. So it just depends on the direction we go as to how quickly we can get started.
Okay, and just for the benefit of the public, I think the last discussion that they may have heard was relative to the formation of a migration steering committee. So if you could just share a little bit more about Operation Municipal Migration, the steering committee, if you could share who the members of the committee are and were, and the number of meetings that were held until we were halted with Tyler.
So the steering committee was made up of myself as project manager, Joni Willingham and Mike Hughes were the other two, plus yourself, President Bowers on the committee. So we did have a vacancy that we wanted to wait for the new administration to come in to fill that position, and then look at all the other members that we were going to put on various teams throughout the project to make sure that was still the correct people. As far as the number of meetings, I believe we had 5. We met every other week to kind of go through. Because we hadn't gotten started, it was basically the logistics of how we wanted to run things, how frequently we wanted to meet, and then how we would actually go about doing the work from a phased implementation standpoint.
And how many phases were a part of the plan?
There were 6 phases. The first one was going to be for human resources, and then we were going to go into finance, and then taxes, and then codes and mercantile, and then asset management would have been the last phase.
And we are still under a deadline with paychecks, is that correct?
As of right now, we are. However, we've got a little bit of new information that their new platform may be able to handle the issue that we were facing back later part of last year. So we need to meet with them to kind of walk through that, which we will do probably within the next couple of weeks.
Okay. I'm curious to note your department's diversity complement.
We have full-time, we have 7 males. 6 are white, 1 is Asian, and 1 of them speaks another language.
Thank you. That was my next
Okay.
question.
Hindi is the language that he speaks.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for the IT department? Seeing none, I believe we're ready to move to the next slide.
The next slide covers solicitor, but I'd like to ask if you would like one at a time, or just depending on if there are any questions, the other parts of the administration department to come up. Like Mike or Joni, or however you'd like to handle it, or we can just have Neil come up.
We could just have Neil come up, and then if we would need someone else, they could come up.
We do have one question from the solicitor's office. Neil, would you like me to read this?
Sure, if you would read it, that'd be great, Marita.
Why is there no budgeted money for training for the solicitor's office? There is a training budget in the Law Bureau. Tuition training 4290001 is listed with $4,080. In addition, many of the continuing legal education CLE credits we obtain are covered under part of our subscription 420003, through which we secure online courses. During COVID, all courses were able to be taken virtually. It's unclear if the required CLE courses were made all virtual pre-COVID. At least half CLE credits are required in-person courses. And that's his answer on the training.
Are there any questions for the solicitor's office?
Could you explain what happened with the lead specialist?
The position has been vacant. We had trouble filling it, and under the current budget, it has been not going to be filled this year based on belt tightening. The collections attorney is going to be filled. That's in the public works budget. But we did have a hard time getting a lien specialist last year.
So we'll still have a collections person,
The collections attorney is in the
but they'll
budget.
be in public works rather than.
It's funded in public works because it's mostly utility billing that they're collecting the trash bills and doing the liens on the trash bills for the commercial properties.
And do you have a sense, so under the,
Yeah, it's been that way the whole time we've had a collections attorney, so funded in that way.
Are there any other questions for the solicitor?
Yes, please. I have a question relative to the assistant city solicitor for contracts. There's no intention to fill that role?
I believe under the mayor's 2022 vision for being frugal to get things sort of in line, they're not going to fill that position. And so we'll have a total of 4 attorneys, counting the collections attorney, myself, and the 2 senior deputies that are there now.
And you feel that you have the capacity to?
So we've never had the capacity. We just do what we got to do. There was a point where I was there by myself. So, that I have 3 other bodies in my mind this is tremendous, and we always say there could be more lawyers because the city has more legal problems than anyone should. So,
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the solicitor's office?
Yeah, so. HRC work.
I could not hear you.
Who is doing the PHRC work
I-
of these roles here?
So the HRC work was the equity officer. That position is not being funded. Part of that work is going to be, and I think what Mr. Singleton's doing, but the mayor and I have met, there are some duties that have to be divided up. That discussion is still being had. At the moment, the same as when it was vacant, when we didn't have anyone, our office picks up the complaint process, and we act as the temporary liaison to the board while they try to fill those positions. And you realize it was vacant for a while, previously finding somebody. And that's what we're doing right now. The reality is there aren't that many complaints that come. So, and then we do the investigation in accordance with the ordinance. And at times we actually sort of outsource that to another city employee who can do a confidential investigation. We are fortunate to have some people that have some very good skill sets, and we've done it both in the past in that context and in the internal union context, where we'll ask a mid-level manager who's connected to the issue to conduct an investigation, and we'll oversee the process with them so that they can make a report either to the director, the business administrator, or the mayor.
So. So it's not certain who's going to be.
At the moment, our newest attorney, Steven, is doing it. So he's got a fresh set of eyes. He doesn't know any of the players. But it's really taking the ordinance and applying it, taking the forms and the questionnaires and applying it. And there are confidential investigations. The reality is a lot of times the complaints we get are sort of not really from here. We'll get a complaint for something that didn't happen in the city. We will try to get them connected to the Pennsylvania Relations Commission and things like that. So we're processing it. But so far, for example, this year, there's been two. One in January, one in February. The other one like literally just came in yesterday or today. And so he will right now be the person processing it. It could be another one of us, just depending on workload at the time it comes in, because we try to get to them promptly.
So, because this role in this, there have been so many permutations.
There have.
Right. So when someone is, I guess, who is the person responsible for like advertising HRC's work or doing the outreach or, kind of the administrative things, who schedules the meetings, who records, is responsible for.
So the meetings under the Sunshine Act are scheduled at the end of the prior year, which is what the Sunshine Act provides for, that boards and commissions publish their annual schedule. So those are already set and advertised. And then it is not always the same person, but right now it's my office. Whether it'll stay my office is not clear. And that is just something we have to work out with the mayor's office. But as you're aware, there's often offices that have more than one hat on, and that's the discussion going on right now.
Any other questions for the solicitor's office?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
I had one question. For the past two budgets, you had 0 for software. And this year, it's on line 43002. There's a budget for $3,060. So I was wondering, what did that software entail? And what will the solicitor's office be using?
So we had in a budget reallocation last year, the acquisition of a high-end scanner that converts the microfilm the city historically has of records to digitally searchable material. It was obtained for a very specific purpose because we have to certify some things back from the 1990s, and they're all microfilmed. And it's not searchable in any way. It's not digitized. And so that software is the annual cost that we're going to have on that software to work with. And it's still, we didn't get it to almost the end of the year. IT has been very helpful in getting the kinks out. And frankly, it's the police who've been using it right now, going back to their old stuff. But there is, I don't know, 1,000 or 3,000 microfilm discs in the city. And eventually they will get digitized.
Thank you.
Council President Bowers?
Thank you, Vice President Green. Just two questions. What is the department's diversity complement?
So there are a total at the moment of 5 employees. There are 1 African-American female, 1 African-American male, 2, I guess technically 3 white males, one of whom is actually from Scotland. So who's got a green card and is working in our office.
Okay, and are any current employees bilingual within the office?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I don't raise that question. So
Okay,
is he? Okay. Stephen is bilingual. What do you speak? French. So
thank you.
good.
Any other questions for the Solicitor's Office? Seeing none, thank you. We will move on to the next slide.
Would you like to go into building and housing now, or would you like to just go on to the general questions and answers we had overall from the budget from Rita to go through?
We can go on to building and housing next.
Okay.
Do we have slides for building and housing?
I do not. We didn't have a specific question directed in your list of questions, but we do have the young lady here to answer your questions.
All right, I will open it up to my colleagues for questions. I will start with Council President Bowers.
Thank you, Vice President Green. Good evening, Ms. Hill.
Good evening.
Just a question regarding the complement within the office. I know there was a recent departure of the project manager for CDBG and home. When do you intend to fill this vacancy? Which quarter of 2022? And then besides this vacancy, are there any additional vacancies within the department?
Yes, so the departure, her last day will be tomorrow. And I'm already working with HR to have the position posted and gather resumes for that to begin immediately interviewing. As far as other open positions, we also have the program manager for ESG and CDBG that is open and interviewed for that and plan to extend to going through the interview process for that. And then there are 2 rehab specialist positions that are open.
You could please provide job descriptions for those roles. My next question is, what is the department's diversity complement?
Sure. There are 2 males and 6 females. And for ethnicity, there are 2 white individuals, 5 Black individuals, 1 Hispanic, and of my department, 1 is bilingual, speaking Spanish.
Thank you. That was my next question. Now moving on to the lead program. What is the status of the lead program?
We are actively moving through to finish out the grant. It is a 3.5-year grant. It is scheduled to end in March of 2023. And once the NOFA is put out, we would plan to reapply to renew that grant. We are also working on a state-led grant portion of it, which allows us to complete lead homes that are not in the city of Harrisburg, but in the immediate surrounding area. At this point, I can get the exact numbers for you, but we are running behind on completion, and that is due to the pandemic and access to materials. and that is nationwide.
Oh, definitely, I understand. So I guess with our lead program, not the state portion, how many families have been served through this program?
I would be able to get the exact number for you, and I'd be able to email that first thing tomorrow.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to know for our program and then the state one as well that we're
Absolutely.
assisting with. And have any of our benchmarks changed given the pandemic?
The only benchmark that has changed, there was from HUD, 80% of the ESG funding was to be spent, or ESG CV, that's CARES Act funding. They wanted that spent by the end of March. And HUD just released a statement that that has been waived for everyone to have that money spent down. That's the
Okay.
only, but no benchmarks have actually changed, just that requirement.
Okay. Now moving to the home program, what is the status of the home program?
So the home program is just now getting some traction due to projects being able to move forward. There were 4 home applicants that were received from organizations, and 3 of them are moving into progress. So 2 of which are coming up on groundbreakings for new construction of homes within the city. And then 1 is going through the PHFA tax credit process, and they are hoping to close by April.
Okay. And same question, how many families have been served through this program?
In year to date, currently none, because none of the programs have made any progress since 2019.
Okay,
And I did, if I could just backtrack, I did get the numbers on the lead program.
okay,
So completion, the target for the complete program for the 3.5 years is 230, and 75 have been completed to date. And that's just on the cities. And then there are 19 on the state lead, and 11 of the 19 have been completed so far.
okay, well, we're moving forward with both. I think
Yes.
considering we're still living in a pandemic, that's great.
Yeah.
So with the home program, have any of our benchmarks changed there due to COVID?
They have not.
Okay. Were any local businesses contracted through the home program?
Through home, those would be organizations.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
all 4 of the organizations through the home program are
Are
all
local.
local here in the city.
thank you.
No problem.
Okay, that concludes my line of questioning. Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions for building and housing?
And then if I could just make one clarifying statement, because building and housing is 100% HUD funded, and this is just for the public's record, our annual action plan is due every August. So that's why it is not included in this portion of the budget.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here tonight.
Absolutely.
We can move on to the next.
All right, I'll keep everybody else from administration back here in case anything does pop up, but Marita, if you can go over just the general questions and the ARP funds primer.
Yes, can everyone hear me clearly now? The budget does not, sorry about that. The budget does not appropriate any ARP money. That will be a wholly separate budget process that we will be discussing as we move through the fiscal year. Items included in the budget position-wise that aren't funded are in here to give you an idea of what departments requested, but the administration decided not to fund at this current point in order to balance a $15 million structural deficit that was approved in the 2021 budget. The budget that we currently operate under. This is to increase transparency and give you more information in case you would like to amend the budget to increase staffing in areas such as we suggest. All mention of the potential ARP projects are being categorized in a list form and will be combined with what is received during public input. This is how the plan is being built. The only ARP funds being requested and built into the budget is the lost revenue replacement as allowed by the program. While this is a planned revenue, it will require discussion and a formal vote later in the year. We will discuss that further again as we move through the fiscal year. And in your packet, I do have a description of some of the discussions, the lively discussions we had about the ARP funding, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But just so you know that when we met with the departments, as you know, during the budget process, every department meets with the administration. We are just more or less fact-finding on what are priorities for public safety in particular, because it's the biggest piece that's normally funded under ARP. And of course, the health issue officer came up because that is also something that ARP is encouraging within their guidelines and so forth. And we're going to work with our new consultant and certainly with yourself, but this was never meant to be something we were trying to roll out. It was more, let's have a discussion, an intelligent discussion. Let's be wise in how the department approaches you instead of not studying things, not looking at some serious particular options. So that was really what the process was about. It was never intended to circumvent anybody else or anything. It was just to kind of get on paper what could be a potential plan to recommend for a starting list, so to speak. But of course, we know that it's a very much a collaborative, including 5 community meetings that will culminate to have a much, much better process than this simplified process I have on this piece of paper. So hopefully that explains that.
I will open it up, this particular question or comment up to questions from council members.
Yes. So can we get a total of the number of positions that are in the budget that are not funded?
We could have it available for you tomorrow. That would be helpful.
Yes, no, yeah, that would be helpful.
Not just the number of the positions, but the
Yeah, and the
amount.
salary, yeah.
Oh, sure.
And the salaries associated with it, title, salary.
Yeah, we'll give you the full intelligent approach to the list. And fortunately, we have been able to fund many of those positions in the amendment, which is hence why there is an amendment. So I do think we've tried to approach this as intelligently as possible, giving this really confined time frame of not only an annual budget, but also a very pleasant amount of money that the federal government has shared with us to help make some intelligent decisions. But we'll be happy to get that for you, Councilman West.
Yep, thank you.
I have a question. Thank you. When we speak of the ARP funding, just for transparency for the citizens, are we referring to the funding in totality or the half that arrived almost a year ago, as opposed to the rest that will be arriving soon?
We're referring to the joint amount, the entire 48 million. Currently, we have the 24 million, which was received somewhere in May or June of 2021. And we've been informed that the second tranche will be in June. So we think the intelligent thing is to look at it as a whole picture. And lucky for us, we have the full amount that we're able to seriously, find ways to help us migrate and get through this pandemic in a successful manner.
Right, and just for clarity, because I'm pretty sure we understand, but for the individuals watching, that the funding that was here was not touched, so that will be
That's correct.
a full allocation
That's
plan.
100% of
Okay,
that
thank
funding.
you.
Pretty remarkable.
Absolutely,
Yes.
thank you.
And
And you
then,
may never see that much again, so I think it's a thrilling, at least I'm excited about it.
Absolutely, and that's why it's a big topic, because I feel as though what we utilize it for could really, bring us to a new day.
Oh,
Thank you.
absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. And then just one other note in that document, I think, we're currently operating under the 2022 budget, that's the short 3-month budget, not the 2021 budget. Is that correct?
But it's identical.
It's identical, okay. It's funded for 3 months versus, okay.
Any other questions from our colleagues? And just for note, how much in lost revenue from ARPA are we planning to use?
Yes, it is in the budget document, and we have discussed it in the past. It's 8.86.
It's coming up in one of the next slides.
Okay, yes.
I
the
just want to make
details.
sure that the public is aware.
Oh, absolutely, and we do have our esteemed accountant who has painstakingly gone through the lost revenues and with a fine tooth comb. So we're very fortunate to have somebody with the level of detail that he has gone to, and I really have to commend him for that.
Thank you. And just to be clear, that is then subtracted from the 48 million?
Yes.
That's correct.
So
But it's coming in the form of revenue. So it's an interfund transfer that's coming. It's currently sitting in a grant, I'm just trying to be brief. It's currently sitting in the federal and state grant fund, FUND, capital F. And it will be transferred at some point with your permission and everything to the general fund via an interfund transfer. And you usually see those at the very end of both categories. So that's why it might not just jump off the page at you, but that's where it's located.
And
And we
that-
do have a slide.
And that transfer is not being done in this budget. That's for further down the road when we handle the ARP funding. Just to let you know.
understood, but so that will make the total available for the public to be working with, quote unquote, about 41 million, we're actually 40.5 or something like that, but just for
That's correct.
transparency.
That's right, for transparency.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions before we move on?
No.
I believe we can go to the next slide.
Okay, very good. Again, continuing on with our ARP funds primer, the ARP funds sent to the city are severely restricted and must fall into the following buckets. Replace lost sector revenue. In this case, would include earned income tax, local services tax, mercantile tax, so forth. Respond to the far-reaching public health and negative economic impact of the pandemic, which for this city has been a challenge for sure, and all cities. Provide premium pay for essential workers. Invest in water, sewer, doesn't say stormwater, but stormwater is also included, water, sewer, stormwater, and broadband infrastructure. And there is a source there, a footnote there if you'd like to see it. And then the NW financial rules determine both eligibility of projects, because it is such a complex, lengthy law, for both the public and the city. Once a project's eligibility is approved, plans will be developed.
Any questions from our colleagues on this? Councilman Rodriguez?
Yes, I heard you refer to the ARP funds as a grant. So did that determine the other items that we had questions about that were contingent on grant funding? Could that possibly be used for those?
Possibly, we'll probably outline those for you a little more closely as we move through the process. We do have our grant writer here who's been extraordinary in helping us with both federal, state, local, and foundation grants. So she can answer
And
specific
it is an
questions.
option that it could be pulled from the ARP funding because we're considering it a grant?
It is a grant.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I just said that because a few questions we had, they were itemized, like they were contingent on a grant coming in. We were saying we weren't going to use the ARP funding, but with the language, technically you still could.
Potentially. Yes.
Okay.
Although I'm not a lawyer, so I have to be real careful. I didn't go to law school. I'd refer my law questions to my team back here.
So every grant, they're not interchangeable. You have to meet that grant's limits. And so that is what everyone does together to figure out
Thank you.
Any other questions? I believe we can move to the next slide.
We're about to move into general budget questions, if everyone's okay with the general, just like summary primer that we gave you so far.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, thank you very much. How much money do we plan to use for the, I am the one that did the ARPA because as a state employee, we call it ARPA. So if you want to, why there's a switch, it's because of me. So to use the ARPA money to fill the itemized zeros in the budget. Well, we do not have a total number of what this costs. As we develop our ARP money plan, the positions we are looking to fund, some of which appear in the budget, are the remaining complement and additional supervisors for the CSA unit in the police department, 4 additional firefighters, and an additional laborers and staff for sanitation and parks and recreation. We'd also like to note that the entry-level discussions are being had and will be furthered with City Council and the community to form a Bureau of Health that will spin out from codes.
Any questions on this response? Councilman Majors?
No. I guess, well, the question I have is regarding the Bureau of Health. But it's not included in the current budget, correct? So that's more of a discussion for the ARPA budget in terms of a newly designated Bureau of Health. That's
Right now, we have a health officer,
right.
Nelva Wright. So what would end up happening is we would ask her to, if it is something we are going to look at doing, come up with almost a white paper, coming up with what she would envision a health bureau looking like. You would then appropriate money through the ARP process for however many years you would like to see, whether it's a year, 2, 3. I think it's up to 4 years we have, Neil.
We have to appropriate by 2024
Or
and spend by
by
2026. It would also require an ordinance.
Right.
Creating good because
An ordinance and be approved by the Department of Health. I mean,
Yeah,
a health department is different than a health officer.
yes,
And I've been very intimately involved with COVID over the last year and know more about health departments and the creation of municipal health departments than I ever thought I would know. So that's.
so you're writing this ordinance is what you're saying.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And some of this does come out of discussions with Chief Enterline, where he talked about how difficult it was getting some pieces of information from the Department of Health because we do not formally have a either Department or Bureau of Health with a fully functioning board underneath it. So a lot of this would help us get to that point. And we looked at comparable cities elsewhere in the state who have well-developed bureaus of public health. Wilkes-Barre, for example, has, I think, 8 staff members within a public health dealing with everything from maternity and child care education all the way up to elder care education and services.
And in all seriousness, your input, because there is a lot of process, would be part of what Nelva would be seeking and the administration would be seeking. So that this is a concept at the moment. So all the work to actually create it and all the check boxes we must hit, the administration will be working to find out what those are, putting them together and presenting it back.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. Because I know there's going to be there'll be a lot more funding involved in the creation of a new department with a new complement than what is currently outlined. So I guess I'll hold off on those discussions until we get to that point.
And the council under the optional third-class city charter laws can create up to a total of 9 departments. So we're not there yet, so it depends how you want to structure it. If you want it under something, if the administration and council want it independent, all of those things.
And then the way I think the mayor is looking at it right now is keeping it under the Department of Public Safety, being a bureau, much like Bureau of Police, Bureau of Fire, Bureau of Codes, Bureau of Health. That's right now how she's envisioning it.
Any further questions on this response? I believe we can move to the next question.
We are anticipating using $8.863 million in federal grant funds in the 2020 budget. What category of ARP is this falling under? $8,863,033 is comprised of $7,863,033 in various lost revenue items, including parking system, Senator Stadium rent, mercantile businesses, business privilege tax, parking tax. And the remaining 1 million includes funds previously provided for the Neighborhood Business Stabilization Program and also the ongoing rental relief assistance program overseen by the City Department of Building and Housing.
Questions for this response from our colleagues? Seeing none, we can move to the next question.
The next question, how will this create a structural deficit moving forward? No, as the current intent here is to change the approach to focusing on sustainable recurring revenue as a basis for future budget planning and preparation. Therefore, seeking a balanced budget each year, revenues equal expenditures.
I will follow up on that question. So this answer, I believe, is under the assumption that we are not funding any of the positions there that are zeroed out in the budget.
Well, it's coming into the general fund for general fund purposes, so it could fund any number of services.
No, but there are things that are in the budget that are zeroed out. That yesterday there was talk about potentially funding them with ARPA money, but now today it's saying we're not presuming we're going to fund anything with ARPA money until after we have discussions with the public.
There's going to be part of a formal request we gave you. There should be a document in there that does talk about some of the funding. No, nothing can be committed yet. Ultimately, you have to vote on the commitment of any funds for it. As it relates to what would be a Bureau of Health, those decisions are going to be coming jointly in our discussions. And as it relates to positions that are zeroed out, to answer that question that you had, yes, that assumption is part of that.
Okay.
And part of getting that, those backed out was part of getting that structural deficit from where it was to where it's at now.
Okay. So essentially the positions that are zeroed out are positions that are not being funded or filled this year and potentially in the future unless we increase our revenue.
That's correct.
Or you could obviously from here amend to add money back into line items to cover certain things.
Right, that's if we amend it. I'm basing it off of what you submitted, not what we can do, not trying to sound smart. I hope that didn't sound smart.
No, it did not.
But just basing it off of what you submitted, it essentially would be cutting those positions, not in a structural sense. They will structurally be there, but they will not exist. And we can actually put someone in that position because we won't have the money for it.
Yes.
Okay. Which essentially is cutting positions, which we started our first presentation by saying we are not cutting any positions.
We weren't laying anybody off. That's what the comment was.
Okay, the play of words, I get it. Thank you.
Very good.
Or if there are no other questions, or
Yes,
Councilman Rodriguez.
absolutely. When we speak of sustainable recurring revenues, are we considering doing anything innovative or new, such as since we're paying rent on the field, allowing maybe promoters or other individuals to utilize the space for maybe shows or concerts to really start gaining more revenue for the city?
Are you referring to like Skyline Field on City Island?
Yeah, that and other spaces we have. Yeah.
Dave Baker will be here tomorrow. Yeah, he does do a lot of that. He could most likely speak to more on those efforts
That'd be great to
tomorrow
know.
when he's
Thank you.
here. But yes, he does shop for those opportunities with us.
I believe we're able to move to the next question. Thank you.
Very good. I think this is a continuation of the answer. I'm not sure. I know there was a discussion of using some ARPA money to supplement the budget, but knowing this is one-time monies as it is sustainable to use this money to supplement the budget, many of the items that are not funded look like they are recurring costs and should be funded using recurring revenue. The answer, it was a question, sorry. The answer, the ARPA funds have a multiple year spending period that we plan on moving ARPA funding positions and spending over the general fund over that multi-year period. Obviously, unlike some cities, we only have one singular year budget. Some cities have multi-year budgets, like a double, most have two. but not many have more than two. But normally in the city this size, a singular budget makes sense. But unfortunately, the way the grant is set up, it's set up for a span of time. So in other words, we have flexibility, which is a great advantage to us as a city. With the amount of money that we'll be rolling off our balance sheets as it relates to debt service payments, the city is in more than a comfortable position to take on such spending in future years. So we're going to be, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but we're going to, one of the bonds, you want to tell them?
Yes. Thank you. Marita, were you referring to the general obligation debt?
Yes.
That's, yeah, this year is the final maturity year for the Series D bonds and the Series F notes. They total to 8.65 million. That's a good planning tool to use to go into next year's planning for next year's budget, and how that relates to our remaining debt, also including the other associated liability that's tied to that debt. That's the bond insured debt. But the idea is to try to look to that as a way of building a budget that's more in line with our revenues, and that will have a definite impact on our planned expenditures for next year with that debt ending this year. Did I answer that accurately?
Yes.
I was going to say Marita's question.
Yes, I think, I just thought it was wise for us to explain to you that we're going to be, this will be our final year on that 30-year bond, finally at the end of it. So next year you will have that 8.65 million left. Do you want to explain a little bit about the AMBEC insurance? And
that's the part I missed. Yeah, the GEO debt I mentioned, the 8.6 million. And this, we also have in the budget, it's a very small payment for AMBEC that relates to the settlement agreement that just happened late last year. So the big payments for the bond insurance that kick off next year, it's always been structured that way because of the timing of when the GEO debt ends. So with GEO debt going away this year, as we go into 23, that's when the AMBEC scheduled payments become more substantial. They approximate $4 million for next year. So that's, when we talk about the GEO debt and our debt going away, and I mentioned the 8.6 million, it's not that total the way it's laid out right now, because you'd have to net it down by what we have scheduled for starting to pay AMBEC those significant payments.
Are there any questions from our colleagues regarding this point? No one?
Just a quick follow. Yeah, the net, I mentioned the 8.6, it would be a net of approximately 4.6 million. It would be freed up in less expenditures next year.
Thank you. Any questions from our colleagues?
thank you, Brian. Very helpful. Thank you.
I believe we can move on to the next question. Thank you.
Why are the actuals provided from 2021 based on May of 2021? I think I mentioned that last night, that we were using the mid-year report data. Since then, Brian again comes through for us, and he has provided for you the most accurate year-end data. Is that audited numbers, Brian?
Well, coming through, actually, I did not come through at the time when I really wanted to, but that schedule we originally provided, where it has the, as you see, that through May is pretty much meaningless at this point. We were fast tracking the proposed budget amounts for this current year with the time frame. But what I just, prior to the onset of this evening's session, I handed out paper copies of the same schedule. It's not an amended, there's no changes, but what I did, I added the column that shows the full 2021 2021 actuals to give you a better comparison. So the numbers, of course, are not audited because it's 2021. Our financial audit has yet to begin. But again, those are complete numbers through the end of last year, revenue and expense for those budget units within the general fund. I plan to follow up tomorrow in a similar way with the Neighborhood Services Fund, which has the same layout, but to add those columns as well for the budget units that are involved. They're not as many, of course. There's the city services piece, parks maintenance piece, and what's already been provided in your packet, in your binder, is the actuals for the three boroughs, three municipalities within the Neighborhood Services Fund, Steelton, Pembroke, and Paxton. So there are actuals for the full year already there for both revenue and expense.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding this? I believe we can move to the next question. Thank you.
Explain the increase in interfund revenues. Prior year 2021 amount of $2,966,000 was most comprised of federal disaster recovery assistance grant funding, reimbursing the general fund for previously advanced fund for the South 14th Street Sinkhole project. For the current year 2022, the total amount of $8,863,033 pertains in full to utilizing a meaningful portion of the already received American Rescue Plan funds. I did speak of that earlier, but just to fully answer your question, that's where we stand.
Thank you.
And also on the sinkhole project funds that are mentioned there. As you know, that project was successfully completed in full by the end of 2019. But at the very beginning of that, due to concerns about timing of getting funds reimbursed, and because they were so, the amounts were looked upon as being very significant, the general fund initially fronted the federal grants fund $2.2 million to get that project off to a good start, to get it moving. And finally, with the completion of the project, we were able to reimburse the general fund back for fronting that money at the beginning of the project. So that's not a recurring, that's a good example of a non-recurring revenue item, which you have to look at when we look at these interfund revenue items. Just like what's been suggested right now for proposed utilization of the rescue plan funds. That's something that's in play for the current year. But again, it won't be something that you can, of course, or that we can annually expect.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, we can move to the next question.
Why does the Bureau of Risk Management have no staff funded in this budget? How will the department operate? Risk management, this is similar to what Neil had discussed earlier. Risk management activities are generally managed by the Law Bureau, the Finance Bureau, and Human Resource Bureau. And therefore, there is no immediate need to have a staffed position. But this operation does remain. And I know our HR folks and our law office takes the lead on this, but we've been able to manage well. I mean, in the past, we've paid $60,000+ for a risk manager. And it is a very costly venture. So the fact that we have some really highly qualified folks that know this type of industry and business that already work for the city. So that's how that's been divided out.
Any questions regarding this response? I believe we can move to the next question. Thank you.
Do you plan to have a reorganization? Is there a new organizational chart that can be shared? As of right now, yes, the mayor wants to pause talks of a reorganization for 6 months until further review can be done on how we can best streamline city operations. And of course, she wants to have input from the various department heads and how the system is working now or not working and how it can best function and be most efficient. And hopefully there won't be continual organization changes every 5 years, there'll be something that will stick because the administration and the council are working closely together to come up with what is a sound, reasonable organization chart, and hopefully we'll get that to you in a very timely fashion.
Are there questions regarding this response? All right, I believe we don't have any question on this. But we do have a question.
So it's maybe not so much a question as a comment. You know, as we're assessing the salaries of individuals, director roles, how many people, you know, how many persons someone is managing, not knowing what the structure of the city is leaves us in a position where we could be unfairly compensating some or not compensating others appropriately. So I think if there are any decisions that the administration has made about what these roles are, it would be invaluable for us as we're assessing what the salary scale should be for each person.
I believe she's still in a studied manner where she's trying to study the
Well,
circumstances.
no, because there are multiple raises, which means that there has been some assessment of something. And as Mr. Hartman mentioned, there are some roles that are going to be merged. So there's some knowledge that there have been some decisions made. And, you know, even if a complete structure hasn't been developed, whatever you have would be valuable.
Yeah, as of right now, like, for example, I mentioned before, we have building and housing with economic development. That's just right now on a temporary basis. So somebody's doing that work. Everything else will be looked at over the next 6 months, and we'll formally roll that out and working with you. And obviously that sort of vote, if we do a reallocation at some point this mid-year, all of that would have to be voted on through ordinance and everything. And then even more so, if we do not put it in 6 months and we extend it out to 12 months, it would be, or at this point, 10 months, it would be part of next year's budget. But as of right now, it's holding firm the way it currently was in last year's budget, the org chart.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so to Council Person Daniel's point, if we could just get a list of the potential changes outside of that. I understand that that's one that's being merged, but we were just talking about the potential for a Department of Health. There was an increase to the health officer's salary, and part of the justification was discussion about the creation of a Bureau of Health. So if there are other positions similar where, while we don't know what that full organizational chart looks like, to Councilperson Daniel's point, that information helps us make informed decisions on some of the increases that are being proposed in the current 2022 budget. So if we could, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Councilman. And I will add, as it relates to the food safety professional position, in last year's budget, it was partially grant funded. So it was the other reason that we forgot about mentioning. So it was partially grant funded. That grant rolled off with codes last year. So a lot of this is, so her pay didn't go down. This is bringing it up through the general fund and paying that position in full.
Well, yeah, like I said, I'm not sure how that, just if we can get that overall picture, that'll be helpful, because I'll just leave it at that and continue.
Any other questions or comments regarding this section? No. I believe do you have more slides, or are those all the slides? Engineering.
Oh,
Right.
well, engineering's actually going to be here tomorrow night because.
Right.
we were
I
trying-
believe we have other department heads that are here. Are they ready for tonight, or will they be back tomorrow?
From administration, would you like?
Yes, if
You'd
the
like
rest
them
of the
to come up?
administration departments could come up, so that if we have any questions, we are able to ask. And then if they could just introduce themselves and
Rebecca?
their department.
Oh, do you mind? Excuse me. Prior to that, I'm just going back and looking at the slide regarding the general budget questions and the money being used from ARP. In terms of when we're discussing the $1 million for funds previously provided to the Neighborhood Business Stabilization Program. The original funding source for that were those city general fund dollars, or was that all the COVID grant?
Right, yeah, that's correct. The $1 million, it's broken into two $500,000 pieces. The first, earlier in the, not long after the pandemic hit, the neighborhood stabilization program was developed. That was a partnership with Impact Harrisburg, where the city provided the funds to Impact, and they were a big part of overseeing the potential grantee or entities that were to be eligible for such assistance. The other 500,000 during the year through building and housing, through our, Denise, if you're still here, you can correct me, the CDBG funds were implemented to provide rental relief, rental assistance, utility type assistance. And those funds were utilized significantly. And the previous administration wanted to, we expected additional funding to come, but we were concerned about a gap. And so as a bridge, the previous administration approved another $500,000 by way of utilizing the available hotel tax funds that benefit the general fund. So that's how that other 500 came.
All right. Yeah, and I think I was just trying to figure out where the funding was that we were essentially, helping to replace with using the lost revenue for. The other pieces I understood.
Yeah, that was all general fund.
Okay.
Yep.
Rebecca, if you'd like to introduce yourself and explain your.
Sure. Hi, my name is Rebecca Vollmer. I'm the grant manager for the city. So I do a lot of the grant writing and the management of grants that we do get, all the compliance and making sure we do reporting on time and drawing down funds and just interacting with the different agencies that grant money to the city.
Thank you, Ms. Vollmer. I will open it up to my colleagues to see if they have any questions about the grants department. Any questions going once?
It's okay. I'm in my little corner. I'm generally like an under the radar person.
All right, there looks like there are no questions for the grants department. Thank you for making yourself available tonight.
Sure.
And we appreciate the work that you do.
Thanks so much. It's fun. It's super fun and enlightening to be here. So I always enjoy council. Thank you.
Actually, Chair Green, can I ask one question before, please?
Yes.
Do you have a plan to go after grants that we haven't established a connection with in the city of Harrisburg? Or to rephrase it, do you have a plan to, what is your plan to go after new dollars that the city hasn't, instead of just repetition with the same grants year after year?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I am a bureau of one, so there's a limit to sort of what I can do. The general strategy has been, so I've been here 4 years now, has been, we kind of know the schedule of which grants come from mostly state, local, and some smaller, just sort of one-off agencies. We kind of know, if it's April, it's DCNR, and if it's May, it's DCED. And then we have different things that come in sort of ad hoc here and there. And then there's RACP and there's some of the federal money. And so we focus very much on making sure that we hit the ones that we know, especially agencies that we already have grants for. For example, the Chutes and Ladders project, we have money from DCNR, we have money now from DCED. And we kind of, because match funding is always a challenge for the city and for our budget, we sort of bounce these grants off each other, which is totally legit. And all the agencies tell us, if you have DCNR, use that grant to be your match for DCED, and then you just keep repeating that cycle. So we want to make sure that we don't miss those things that we already know about, and we have really good established relationships with the agencies. The challenge, as you say, is that there are new sources of money. There's what used to be Tiger is now Raise. There's the Raise money. There's money. There's ways to use there are things for which ARPA money could be used, whether it's for infrastructure or when we talk about public health impacts. I mean, I know there are limitations on the ARP funding, but under the umbrella of public health, some of that is parks and outside recreational activities. So there are ways, if you can spend the time looking through, especially the federal stuff, which is very, very detailed, as you know, you can find ways that, there is a pot of money that we could use, that we could at least try to get money for this. So really the challenge is finding ways to keep everything organizationally under one umbrella, which is, more or less me, so that there's somebody always who knows, if it's this grant, this report is due on this day in this month. And it's just helpful to have one person kind of have all of that in her Outlook calendar versus like having it all farmed out to all the different departments. That said, now that we have some great project managers in some of the different departments, I've been able to collaborate with some of the departments so that it frees up a little bit more time for me to start researching and investigating in new territory, because I have some help from some of the departments with managing the grants that they already have. It's not a great answer to your question, but my strong desire for the next couple of years of my time here is to get us into, like, I think we need to be swimming in bigger pools. And I mean, the state money is fantastic and we love it and it's great, but it's, it's 250. Most of the grants have a cap, so it's 250,000 at a time. And if you're looking at a project that's $1 million project, that's going to take you 4 years to fund. So I do think that, like, making sure that we don't sort of mess up what we already have by being late on things or not compliant. I do think we need to take it to the next level, and it's hard because it's just me, but I think that having some more robust personnel in some of the other departments is going to be able to, it'll free me up a little bit to start looking at some of these other things.
Absolutely. I just encourage, as we grow and develop, definitely try your best if we can go after some new, that would be awesome. Thank you for your answer though. No more questions, Chair Green. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Majors.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the work that you do. And it's a yeoman's job trying to manage all of these things with a bureau of one. So could you just give us how many grants come through your department or bureau, excuse me, per year? Are you in charge of trying to actively manage?
Right now, I'm trying to envision my spreadsheet. This is another thing that is sort of a challenge, but we've dealt with it forever. We don't have a database. We just don't have the funding to get a grant management database. And we could do it, but it would take, again, somebody doing a lot of research because there's so many different options out there and they're very expensive, like $40,000, $50,000 a year. And that's a huge expense to ask anyone to make. So we use spreadsheets, and it's, Excel is a very powerful tool, but it's spreadsheets, and they're not evergreen. So every, week I kind of go in and update whatever. So I'm envisioning, I think we're running my area is, I'd say there's about 30 grants, and ranging from, 13,000 for a study of the armory to, a couple million for PennDOT grants. So it really runs the gamut.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
And that my next question was going to be, annually, how much, money is being utilized? I mean, how much money through grants are we getting? So it's probably a few $1 million just.
Yeah,
in grants.
I mean, if you count in the engineering grants, and that's a whole other animal, and more like when Wayne was here, he more or less dealt with them especially with PennDOT. He did most of the applying for the PennDOT grants. I've been sort of bringing some of them under my purview a little bit, just to kind of make sure that we're, keeping current with them and keeping everything going in terms of getting reimbursements done. And, it's just a matter of submitting invoices and canceled checks and such to PennDOT. With the engineering grants, it's easily 5 million.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I know, and I just noticed in the budget where there's, we zeroed out the professional services line. It was $1,000 last year, and then zeroed this year for professional services in the budget that was adopted. Is there a reason as to why? Or you think
Is that in my budget?
Yes. Bureau of Grants. Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My budget's tiny.
Yeah, it's tiny. Yeah, it looked like everything got funneled to communications.
Yeah. So there's money that's been put in there in line items, and it's a little bit for training, a little bit for professional services. There's money in there, I think, for licensing. Honestly, we could take it out because $1,000 is not enough to really do anything.
Right.
I mean, if we're looking at buying an actual grant management database, That's like
Right.
50 grand, so.
Yeah. And have you?
I've actually never
Yeah,
spent, in the 4 years I've been here, I've never spent money.
okay, no, and I'm just curious in terms of any proposals that you have provided, you know, I think it would be incumbent. I mean, I think getting you even just a assistant to help manage your spreadsheets would be great, let alone getting some database, a grant management database, because I think there's we're looking at ROI, you are extremely valuable in terms of the amount of money that we are providing to your department versus the amount of revenue coming in or through via grants to help the citizens of Harrisburg. So I'm just going to publicly say, like, if as a council, if we try to see, you know, moving some money around to potentially find some assistance, because I think that'll free you as a director up to search grant management database.
Yeah.
You know, what would a migration look like? Have you been in, how about this? Have you been in contact with the city treasurer and the team that's been looking at migrating to this new database and seeing if that's something, a tool that could be added to the Tyler Technology contract? Has that been in discussions at all? I don't know if it's you or to the administration.
Do you mean like all the Laserfish documents, that system?
Yeah. So we had a conversation last night about how codes is going to look to, you know, update a lot of their processes. And I don't know if that's another tool that could be added on to anything that Tyler Technologies or whatever company we end up deciding to go with to do this migration.
Steve,
Yeah.
good point.
Grants database systems are pretty unique. So they kind of have their own little niche. They don't really integrate well with
anything
ERP type systems. So I know it was several years ago, Rebecca and I did look at a system, and as she mentioned, it was very expensive. And at the time we decided to hold off. But it is something we could revisit if folks feel it would be important to incorporate into our day-to-day operations.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Rebecca, for the work that you do.
Sure. I just wanted to piggyback on, we actually, and Steve sat in on some conversations and some demos that we did. Part of the issue with bringing in a grant management system is that it's so comprehensive. It would involve completely overhauling all of our financials. So it wouldn't just be, we'd be tracking the grants, but also how the grants are reported and how the grant funding flows into the different city funds. It would sort of like reach its fingers into everything we already do. So I think a lot of our conversation was like, we can't really overhaul the entire ocean just for like one little octopus over here on the side.
Right. But, okay. Well, then I guess as a part of, once we figure out what our new system is going to be, maybe talking in 2023 about trying to do some additional integration. Okay, thank you.
If I might add, one of the reasons why I'm involved too is that I have pretty extensive experience as the regional rep for 15 counties for the last 5 years with grant writing. And of course, Rebecca and I collaborated a lot with the Act 47 program. So hopefully, I hope I can add value to her operation. She sits in with my team and she's been very valuable, and she and I have already been able to collaborate on some things. So I'm hoping that that between the two of us, we can have some synergy to help improve that process and maybe look for better processes for the upcoming fiscal year and have that discussion with the finance chair, of course, as we move forward with more knowledge and more information. But we do have those ideas kind of brewing, but haven't come to full fruition. And I think the new systems could add value in the sense that there are modulars within those systems, particularly with codes and housing that may be able to, and transportation that may be able to add some value. But that's yet to be seen till we decide on what the ERP system is we would provide, until Rebecca and I get to know each other a little better and be able to really look at, what are my strengths, what are her strengths, and how can we exercise that synergy.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Rawls, did you still have a question?
Yes, I did. And good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
I was wondering for DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, they have a lot of grants that help with educating and protecting and awareness of the water, the air, and the land. So I was wondering how many grants of those do you go after a year? And have we received any?
Sure. So right now we go from DEP, every year we go for the 904, which isn't really a grant, it's more of an award. And it's awarding the city for the recycling activity that we did, and they measure it by tons, residential, commercial, recycling, glass, cardboard. So it's sort of an award for what we did in the previous year. And it's actually surprisingly comprehensive what you have to submit and tell them not just how much we brought in, but where we put it and who are our partners that, who takes the glass and what do they do with the glass and what have you. So we do the 904 every year, and that's between sort of 50 and 65,000 a year. It just depends on what value the materials have in a given year. So we always do that one. The 902 is the main source for funding for new trucks, recycling vehicles, or trash collecting vehicles for public works. That one we are only eligible to apply. Everybody is only eligible to apply once every 2 years. So if we get it 1 year, we have to wait the next year and then apply again. That one has a $350,000 cap. It's a lot of money, actually. It's never quite enough to get 2 trucks, but it's a good stretch. It's a good piece of the pie that we need. We always go for that one. That's, again, it's a big, long application that requires a lot of different people's input. Sorry, my mask is being a problem. Then there is this program called the VW Driving PA Forward. That is a finite thing that has sunsetted. And that was from the VW settlement where they were trying to make amends for having lied about the emissions of their vehicles, what have you. We got a lot of money from that one. And that was both for recycling trucks and trash collecting. But it was mostly, the point of it was to have municipalities take vehicles that they had that were not emissions friendly and retire them. And by retire, I mean you have to drill a hole into the engine block. So retire for good, and then replace them with new vehicles that were more emissions friendly. So that's a program that we aggressively pursued, and we got those grants. And then there was another for EV charging station, which was also funded by the VW Driving PA Forward. So right now for DEP, what's really left, so the VW stuff is done essentially. Right now, we're really only going for 902 and 904. But as you say, there are other projects. I 100% agree. And I mean, I don't know, good and bad news. We lost our recycling coordinator, Christopher Neef. Tremendous guy, knows a ton, and he's now at DEP. So, and we have really good relationships with DEP. So that would be an agency. They have a lot of funding. They're going to get more. Exactly right. And the infrastructure money is going to come down through DEP among other agencies, but DEP is going to be a focus. So that is an area that we should spend some more time, do some more investigation, and try to find some new programs. 100%.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for answering that. And also because there are a lot of youth grants in there for educational projects for the environment. So do you plan on applying for any of those this year?
I do. And I also I have a dear friend who's he's my brother's wife's sister's husband. He used to be the executive director of a nonprofit called Frack Tracker. He's now the executive director of Keystone Trails. Tremendous person. So they're over in Mechanicsburg, but he is all about wanting to do a program that doesn't just involve youth in let's clean up parks, let's learn about different kinds of fish, but really giving youth training to sort of actual skills, really help them consider if they want to consider a career in park management or trail restoration or hydraulics engineering, whatever, stormwater management, whatever. So he's just one of many people in the area. But and I know that it's a big priority for the mayor to be providing things for youth that are exciting and real opportunities, and getting youth in Harrisburg involved and engaged. So that would be not just fun professionally, but a sort of a project of the heart. I would absolutely love to do that for sure.
Okay, great. Yes, that's why I was asking, because I know that's a big thing with the educational part and teaching our youth about the different ways they can help the environment, and that way they are exposed to different type of jobs as well that they're connected with that they're not aware of,
right?
If they don't have that education. So with that said, in the grants you do want to go after and the many grants you do try to, how many personnel would you need to really help you do what you need to do?
Well, in Parks and Rec, we have a tremendous project manager, Debbie Rehart, and of course, Dave Baker is, one of my great friends here at the city. I feel like Parks and Rec has a very dynamic, very engaged, devoted staff. So I have a lot of help there in terms of applying for grants. I think the issue is always balancing, we can apply for stuff, but what if we get a grant? Does Parks and Rec have the personnel that can actually carry that out? Or like, let's say we get money to build a new park. Do we have the staff to maintain it 5 years from now? So those are balance questions and that's like above my pay grade, but that's always in my brain and in all of our minds when we apply for something. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Director Vollmer?
I'd just like to make a statement, if I may. I just wanted to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. With a position such as vital such as yours, I really like to advocate to see it increase your complement as well as the department so you can get as many hands on deck. It might be pie in the sky, but I would love to see that eventually.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Director Vollmer. I appreciate you making yourself available tonight and I appreciate the work you do.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Mike Hughes? Mike, your presentation's up.
There should be a slide or two before that one.
Oh, sorry. Is that the first
That's
one?
the first one. Thank
Okay,
you.
sorry about that.
Sorry. Good evening, Council. Mike Hughes, Tax Administrator here at the City of Harrisburg. I wanted to take this opportunity, if you allow me, just to provide you with a snapshot of our higher revenue items and how they've performed over the past 4 years in light of the pandemic, which items have been trending up and which have been going down as a result of the pandemic. And I also wanted to take the opportunity to follow up on some prior year budgets in which you had approved 2 positions for my office over those past 2 years. And I'd like to show you as follow-up to that, the resulting income that we basically proved that we needed and justified those positions. So starting with this particular slide, as you can see at the very bottom of the total income of just these particular items, we do collect more than this, a lot of smaller items, but these are the bigger ones that I wanted to focus on. As you can see, in 2019 is kind of where we hit the high water mark overall in our collections, and then the pandemic hit in 2020, and the overall number, went down, and then we rebounded a little bit in 2021. So if you could go to the next slide, then, Marie. So in particular, mercantile tax actually surprised all of us. In 2020 and 2021, in light of the pandemic, we actually continued to rise in the mercantile business privilege tax. As you can see there, back in 2018, we were at 2.7 million, and last year we closed a little over 3 million. So I'd like to give credit to my staff and our civil litigation unit, for all their work that led to this. We basically had to pivot on certain items. And with the time that the building was closed, we kind of shifted and utilized that to bear down on the collections when we didn't have customers in front of us. And as a result, we were able to continue to rise up on the mercantile tax section. And also, as I had stated, in 2020, we added a second paralegal that you guys approved for us. And then in 2021, we promoted within and added a deputy to my department. And the result of those 2 individuals greatly led to these tax increases. And we'll show that more on the next couple slides. Okay, if you move forward. All right, so the last slide was what we call it current year, even though it's for the prior year. But these prior years are for any years before the last year, going backwards on delinquent taxes. So as you can see, I mean, we had a huge spike from 2020 to 2021 as a result of adding those two new positions. We went from 159,000 in prior year collections to, a little over $500,000. So very successful as a result of adding those two positions. So if you move forward. And the same goes with penalty interest, as you'll see in this slide. The penalty went up from 125 to 223 from 2020 to 2021. And then the next slide shows the interest, same thing. It went up from 31,000 to 80,000 in the last 2 years. So, like I said, all the reward goes from the time our staff put in to working these accounts. So. If you forward to the next slide. All right, so now we'll talk about the items that went down as a result of the pandemic. The first would be the amusement tax. As you can see, we kind of peaked out at 304,000 in 2019. Then the pandemic hit and the number dropped by 100,000 in 2020 as things started to shut down at the farm show complex, no baseball games. And a lot of the big revenue was lost and it started to slide, which continued on into 2021. The beginning of 2021, right, most of the farm show events didn't occur. And, a lot of the clubs and other venues just weren't open and we weren't getting, that amusement tax as a result. We do believe it will start to rebound a little bit here in 2022. But I think it's going to be a couple of years till we get back to the 2019 number. So. And if you move to the next slide, okay, and similarly, the parking tax, as you can see right here, once again, we peaked at 4.2 million in 2019. And then once the pandemic hit, we started to backslide down to 3.5 and then 3.3. And we're actually lucky that we still were able to bring in that amount of receipts from parking. And really that's attributable to some of the long-term leases that were in effect, or these numbers would be a lot worse. So, all right, next slide. All right, here, just to give an idea of the number of licenses we issue every year, and going back to 2018, a total of 501, and that steadily rose to last year where we issued 599 total business licenses. And I've also provided the breakdown between the number of city-based businesses and non-city-based business licenses that we have issued, just so you can see that. Generally, we run, like a 55, 45 or 60-40 split in favor of, we issue more non-city-based businesses. So also that means a lot of our tax revenue comes from non-city residents, not only from mercantile tax and license, but when you think about the parking tax and amusement tax, that's people coming into the city, not our own city residents. So the majority of the tax revenue that we bring in is from non-city residents. So that's why we try and, work this as best we can so it frees up the burden on property taxes and other areas from city residents. So, all right, I think we might have one more slide. Okay, and just a quick snapshot of the civil collections, just because of, we added that paralegal position, and to show you the result of that, that person came on board in 2020, started getting up to speed, started filing civil suits, which is a process and it does take time, especially trying to locate people, get service, get them into court and so forth. So the revenue really started to come in from that effort in 2021, and you can see the big difference from 400,000 to 1.3 million in civil collections. So that's the slides I put up here. The complement office, in addition to myself, I have 5 other women. 4 are white, 1 is a minority, and she is trilingual. So if anyone has any questions, I can answer those now.
thank you for providing those slides, as well as thank you for the follow-up to kind of show the benefits of adding that position. That was really helpful. I will start by opening up to my colleagues, starting with Council President Bowers.
Thank you, Vice President Green. I agree. I think the slideshow was definitely helpful. I just had a question relative to the vacancy available within your office for the revenue specialist.
Yes.
Which quarter of 2022 do you intend to fill this role?
We're going to shoot for the first quarter. I don't know if it's realistic with the volume that HR is going to be dealing with. So the second quarter would be the latest.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Councilwoman Rouse?
Thank you, Vice President Green. Good evening, Mr. Hughes, and thank you for joining us. I just had a question. When you were talking about the mercantile tax.
Yes.
In my budget on page 16, I know you mentioned they had gone up for the past couple of years, but in my budget, unless I'm on the wrong line, it seemed as if my numbers didn't match and it looked like it had been going down.
Good point. And that's kind of why I provided the breakdown, because I wanted to show a little bit more. In the budget, when they put it in, they kind of lumped a lot of items under the mercantile heading, but truly mercantile had gone up. It was parking and amusement that pulled the items down. But what you're looking at is, like I said, you're looking at the heading of mercantile, which has the parking and amusement kind of embedded in that number from where you're looking at the budget on page 16.
Okay, so maybe this question is more for administration. Is there any way that could be separated so it makes more sense, because it doesn't match what's being said, so it's kind of like a discrepancy?
I think there may be another section that does break it down, Brian, maybe in the budget between.
There was, but it still.
Actually,
I
on
think
page 19, it looks like.
Yeah, but I don't know if it matched the numbers you had up there, though.
Yeah, if you look at page 19, you have the actual, like the parking. I can just eyeball it right there. The 4.2 kind of matched what the 2019 number was. And then, it went down to 3.5 in 2020 and down to 3.3. So those are the numbers I had just put up there for that. And also, the amusement tax, same thing, I can eyeball that. We peaked in 2019 at 304, started sliding to 203 in 2020, and then down to 117 in 2021. So there are those items that's pulling it down, even though they're listed, once again, under the heading at the top under mercantile. But then you can see the breakdown of the individual items below that, all there on page 19. So. And once again, the third item will be, if you look at the MBP tax current year on page 19, starting with 2019, you can see there it's, 2.8, and it rises to 2.9, and then goes up to 3.5 million, like the slide had shown also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I can show you afterwards if you like. It's no problem. So.
Yes, and I just, for the residents too, when they see it, it's a little confusing. So I don't know if going forward, if that's able to be a little bit more
it actually could
understanding.
be labeled like Act 511 taxes, and then it encompasses all of those items below. Yeah. That's true.
Just something to make it more understanding.
For
Thank
sure.
you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
We'll work towards that goal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from our colleagues? Seeing none, thank you very much once again for the PowerPoint presentation and showing us that analysis. And thank you for the work that you do as well.
Thank you.
I'd like Joni Willingham from Human Resources.
Good evening.
Good evening. If you could just introduce yourself and your department, even though she just did.
I'm Joni Wellingham. I'm the HR director.
All right, and I will start with my colleagues if we have any questions for the HR department. Councilwoman Bowers, or excuse me, Council President Bowers.
Thank you, Vice President Green. Good evening. I just had a question regarding complement. So at this time, there is no interest in filling the personnel manager vacancy?
Personnel manager, that was changed to a payroll manager.
Okay, thanks for
So there is a
clarifying.
payroll manager. And there are 5 females in our department, 2 African-American, 2 Hispanic, both are bilingual, and 1 white.
Thank you. When do you intend to fill the deputy director vacancy?
As soon as possible.
Has a vacancy announcement been shared?
Not yet. We were
Okay.
waiting for budget approval to make sure, that the funds were being allocated for that position.
Okay, if you could please share a copy of the job description, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the Human Resource Department?
Good evening, Mr. Bloomington. How are you?
Fine, how are you?
Good, thank you. I just had one quick question. I see there's a human resource specialist, and I know that it's zeroed out for a second one, and understand the talks we've been having about the zeroed out. But just to get the conversation going about that, what does a human resource specialist do, and what would a second one be used for?
Our human resources specialist does all the interviews, job postings, keeps the paperwork moving as far as when someone's interviewed, sends out letters, as far as if you're moving to the next step. They collect all the information when we do contact a candidate and let them know, okay, you'll be considered for this next step in the process. Please provide us with this information. So with the amount of positions we have open currently, she is very overwhelmed. We are utilizing the secretary some and trying to, because she's only been there 3 months, and trying to teach her the process. And I also fill in and back up as needed.
Which, like you said, is overwhelming when and
Correct.
there's a lot of open positions and a lot we're trying to fill. So
Correct.
I understand that.
And I'm also assisting with risk management. I do all the claims.
Right, that's right. We did just say, okay. All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for the Director of Human Resources?
Just real quick, and hello, Ms. Whitehan, Director Whitehan. I noticed there's a increase, not a significant increase, but an increase in the contracted services under miscellaneous contracted services in the budget. And just
I believe that the $10,000 we put in there for imaging. Our files for all of our employees are still paper. So we still have paper files from employees and retirees going back to the early 80s.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for making yourself available tonight, and thank you for all of the hard work that you do and that your department does. Thank you. And then do we have anyone else?
I do have a brief question. The planning director happens to be here this evening. There was
I noticed him sitting there.
And he doesn't have a huge operation. Would you mind if he joined us this evening for a brief conversation? If not, he can come back tomorrow.
I just love seeing Jeff sit there. So. I would not have a problem. Would any of my colleagues have a problem with Director Knight?
Before we move forward with Director Knight, I did have a question or questions relative to the Bureau of Communications, since that's under the administration. Is there
sure.
anyone
Certainly.
present that can answer those questions?
Right now, just Marita and myself.
Okay, well, I'll still ask them for the benefit of the public, I guess. Can you please provide an overview of the city's communication needs that are addressed in the budget?
Okay, so taking a look at how it's structured right now, position-wise, we currently have 2 employees complement currently filled. One being multimedia manager, who is here right now, actually helping with the cameras and the filming. The additional is a multilingual community services coordinator who handles a lot of translation services, including overseeing the Spanish language portion of the ARP funding meetings that we're going to be hosting starting next week that Gina Johnson Roberson is working on. But then you'll notice the two positions that are above it dealing with marketing and communications. Those are vacant positions and are currently looking at being filled by individuals who will overtake social media. Hopefully an expansion of WHBG to include a lot more programming, not only just for the youth, but for citizens as a whole. There would be a direct person within marketing who would be overseeing that. And then with communications, obviously, you probably saw the jump in pay. A lot of that was due to competitive nature of salaries. If you look at state employment in similar positions, they're all well over $100,000. So to be competitive with the private sector and our fellow public sector employers, that's why that salary was increased that much. And then in addition, for marketing, adding those WHBG duties there, a lot of that is because as it pertains to editing and recording, there's a lot more skill set that is needed within that to assist Asher in expanding those programming. So what we're really looking at doing is beefing up social media, beefing up WHBG, and finding out new ways to communicate. And I know the mayor has talked about potentially looking at ways we can start up a newsletter again, where we will focus on the actual work that's done by departments, different things like that. But there's still a great deal of flexibility of what that's going to be based off of the vision of the people that would be coming in to run those positions. Hopefully, the positions are posted. So in the next few weeks.
So I'll revisit the communications manager in a moment, but I wanted to note, so I guess the former communications assistant and graphics specialist, their duties will now fall under the marketing and WHBG TV manager?
Yes.
Okay. And then the production technician, which was a part-time role, that is no longer needed at all?
Yeah, I think the way the role was the WHBG, the expanded sphere of what they're working on would be covered by that aspect of that.
Don't forget your microphone so everybody can hear you.
And that's Asher's old position.
Okay. Okay. So now going back to the communications manager role, yes, it is a significant increase. And I understand the need to be competitive in the space. Would you say that this role is comparable to a director role?
Yes, they'll be working not only with council, but they'll be working with all of the other areas of the city, every bureau, every department, Bureau of Police, Bureau of Fire, coordinating all of that sort of the external and internal communications, because we do a number of internal programming here within the city. So there's quite a bit of work to be done, but the vision of how that would take shape is going to be built around what these individuals, how they'd like to see the communications bureau run.
So with this significant increase in the salary for the role, how has it changed, or how will it change, or it's just based on this person's vision? What duties will change?
Well, I mean, one of the main things is on-call duties to help assist with fire and police. One of the things is we do not know when disaster is going to strike in the city. You will hear Chief Enterline had talked about earlier this weekend, he was out at 2:00 in the morning because there was an ice jam that was just a few short hours away from going over the banks if it did not clear up. So what a lot of this role is, and the reason some of that is expanding is there are going to be a lot of on-call duties for this individual. So that would be not only their normal work hours, but in times of need, whether it's a fire, whether there's an emergency, a disaster, any sort of crime issues, they're going to have to work very late hours, very difficult hours. They're going to be called and woken up at 1:00, 2:00 in the morning and have to go somewhere. So part of it also is the duties that are going to arise out of that. That's causing us to have to look at how we structured this job and how we pay it.
So 2 additional questions. So will their role also entail, I guess, like a public information officer role?
Yes.
So they will be public facing with the news media and other outlets as well. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, where this role hasn't done that in the past?
yes.
Okay, and so with the expanded duties of the role, I would like to see an updated job description, please. And I'm asking this line of questioning because I believe many of my fellow council members and colleagues during previous budget hearings were very vocal in the increase to $68,000 for this role. So that's why I just want to be clear on what the expectations are for the new communications manager, because it seems like it's a merge of a few roles, honestly, but vastly different from the previous communications manager.
Yes, you'll have it in the morning.
Thank you. Oh, I have 2 more questions. What is the Bureau's diversity complement to date? And are any current employees bilingual?
Well, currently, right now, it's 2. It's 1 white male and 1 Hispanic female. And yes, the Hispanic female speaks fluent Spanish.
Thank you.
Councilman Majors?
Thank you. And to, I guess, piggyback off of President Bauer's line of questioning, are we looking to change the title of the job that $90,000 puts that person more commensurate with a director's salary versus what would be considered a manager in the way that the city has been structured? Are we looking at?
It would be director level position, but because it's not like a director as a department, it would still fall under a manager's role. But it's if you look on the hierarchy of how things would fly on responsibilities, it would be more in line with what a director is.
Okay, so then that would still at this point be under the Bureau of Administration. They may not have, under the Department of Administration, there won't be its own separate director until maybe potentially a reorganization. Okay, and I think all the other questions I have were previously asked, so that's it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Daniels?
I just wanted to know how much were the language line expenditures for 2021. I wasn't sure where to find them.
Shemaine, the full, if you look on the handout I gave at the beginning, that it's, I want to say it's near the middle of the packet for this particular budget unit. The 2021 actual for the whole year. Excuse me.
And I apologize, I have to get going, so that's.
Yeah, I have it right here. The 2021 actual total was $228,786 for communications.
Sorry, no, the language line. Like specifically
sorry.
language line.
I'm sorry, were you referencing, I'm not seeing that description.
Yeah, we're supposed to have a contract, and in past years we've used it with language line to provide interpretation for constituents as they come in. Like even if someone calls 311 and has a question, they speak, Bhutanese, we use language line to assist
I
them.
believe that's just under one of the, there's a bunch of contracted services. It doesn't just cover one contract.
I thought in the past it was in communications.
It may have been, but I think it's just under the general contractual services.
Okay,
It's all over the budget.
Okay,
There is a line in that budget unit for, it could be under miscellaneous contracted services for the year, and it was roughly, it was $5,400 for 2021.
Okay. If someone could just make sure, get me the number, takes it, appreciate it. All right.
Sure.
Are there any other questions regarding the Department of Communications? Excuse me, the Bureau of Communications. Seeing none? Thank you.
I didn't feel the need to reintroduce myself and Brian, so I hope you're okay with that. You've seen us like 4 or 5, 6 times in the last 2 weeks. I think you have our roles under control,
Yes.
but just wanted, so, if you guys would consider talking to planning, that'd be great.
Is anyone against talking to planning tonight?
Jeffrey? And thank you for your tolerance. I greatly appreciate it.
Good evening, Director Knight. If you could introduce yourself and your department.
Sure. My name is Jeffrey Knight. I am the director of the city's planning bureau. Our complement of staff at the moment is 2 males, both white.
I will start by opening it up to my colleagues for questions for the Planning Bureau.
I have a question, 2 questions. Good evening. Just curious when you intend to fill the Urban Planner 1 vacancy?
As soon as possible. I think we'll be, assuming it ends up in the final budget, we'll be looking to post the job shortly thereafter.
Okay, can you please share a job description?
Sure.
Next vacancy is with the Historic Preservation Specialist and Archivist. Yes, that is a vacancy that we have. So when do you intend to fill this role? I know it may be rather niche.
Yeah, well, I believe it's the unfunded in the current year's budget.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
So I will
Wow,
probably
that's a
be,
loss.
taking, yes, it is a loss.
It is a loss.
Our previous historic preservationist, Frank Grumbine, was really great. I'd been here about 3 years or so. His last day was January 4th. But in his stead, I'll be taking over responsibilities for the review of historic preservation and management of the HARB meetings.
Okay, thank you for that clarification and letting us know. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one question for your bureau. I know in working with you that it's been hard to keep someone in that planner position. Is there, when we have these frequent exits, is there a consistent theme as to why they are leaving?
I think for the most part, it has been a move to a different part of the country, usually like a move for a personal reason, or like, hey, I'd like to go try a different maybe topic of planning. Our current vacancy is actually there because our current deputy planning director moved from the urban planner position. So he had been there since about June of 2020. And so he moved into the vacant deputy planning director position. So that's why that current position is currently vacant.
That is the only question I have at the moment. Any other questions from my colleagues for the Bureau of Planning? Councilman Rouse?
Thank you, Vice President Green, and good evening, Mr. Knight. I was wondering, during your resident meetings or public meetings and hearings, we do have a subscription from Language Line. I'm guessing, I did hear that a little bit tonight. Are you utilizing that when you do have a resident who comes in and their first language is not English? Is the meeting stopped and Language Line is utilized?
We have not used a Language Line yet. I think for the most part, the language issues arise with a applicant as as opposed to the residents. And as a general rule, applicants have brought their own interpreters with them. If I don't believe we've had somebody ask for one, but it's certainly something we'd be willing to utilize to help them out if it was requested.
Yes, I will hope so. Just make sure everybody understands what they're placing on the application, or even during the public hearing, if that does arise. Language Line is very good. I use it as a teacher in school and during conferences. I call my number, I put in the language, there's a sheet, and someone comes on and they interpret very well. My other question was, oh my, it just slipped right out. I did have one more.
If you'd like me to come back to you, I can.
Yes, please, because I did.
Are there any other questions from my colleagues for the planning? Councilman Majors?
Yes, I guess one other question would be, have we explored the use of different facilities and/or broadcasting our zoning hearing board, planning commission meetings via, a video telecommunication service?
Yes, that's definitely something we've discussed, and I know we've actually, I believe, had some preliminary discussions with the Law Bureau about that, and I think there was some discussions about legislation to permit Zoom meetings, so to kind of do that in parallel with the in-person, and we're definitely willing to do that, looking forward to doing that. So whatever, I guess, needs to be done from an administrative or a legal prospect, we'd be happy to help that along so that could be something we do as part of our meetings.
Okay, and then, yeah, because I know we have a ordinance before us currently now that is going to go through the process to expand, hopefully, our telecommunication and video services for different boards and commissions in the city. I also see, just I'll note, the conference line is zeroed out for 2022. Is there any particular reason why there are not any planned conferences for planning in 2022?
I think a lot of the planning industry has gone to virtual, as many places have. So a lot of what we've been doing as far as attending those, I think, is wrapped into the training budget. So I believe the tuition and training, yeah, it kind
that's
of
going up. So okay, so that's going to encapsulate everything
Yeah.
else. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the Bureau of Planning? Councilman Rouse?
Yes, actually, Councilman Majors, he did ask about the videotaping of the different boards and commissions. I think that would be very helpful. Just as ours are televised, I think the public would also like to see the other boards and commissions. So I hope that's something we can work on through administration and with planning, code, zoning, all of that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Because I think, during COVID, when we went fully virtual, you definitely reach a different audience. We kind of noticed that. And so I think having those things side by side would, could only improve public engagement.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one question for you, Director Knight. I know that you spent a lot of time working on the comprehensive plan along with the Planning Commission. And is this something, since it's been passed by city council, is this something that your office is using when it's receiving applications or using to help plan the direction of the city?
Yes, absolutely, in several ways. One of which is the letters of plan consistency that we get requests for. So the comprehensive plan was adopted, I think, November 23rd, I want to say, I think was the date. So it's been active for a few months now. And when we get, when there are individuals or organizations going after grants, they'll oftentimes ask us for a letter of plan consistency. And in the past, we've kind of been stuck between, well, we've got this 40-plus-year-old plan, and then we've got this pending one, but so we're kind of in the middle. And now we're able to give, I think, a lot more background to the types of projects and able to work with them. For example, CRW has asked us for these for some of the grants they're going after. And so now we're kind of able to say this hits this, this, and this, instead of more, okay, well, we have this document we're hoping we adopt and it's going to cover these topics. So it helps in that manner. And additionally, when we have development projects coming through, like land development plans, particularly if they tend to be larger ones or new constructions, as opposed to some of the conversions that council has seen a lot over the recent years, that's you're developing a new building, something that's going to be there for 40, 50 years, hopefully. And so we've gotten a few of those the first couple months here, and we've referenced the code and said, the zoning or the comprehensive plan, and said the comprehensive plan, recommends that the buildings address the street in a certain way or incorporate some sort of public good, even, that's not a street vacation, but it just may say, hey, we want this site to, approach the street in a way that meets these goals of the plan. And it's definitely been helpful for us, and I think helpful for those applicants, as far as getting something like a little bit more crystal than just saying like, hey, this project needs to be a little bit better. So having something you can point to, like trying to meet action item, H 1.7 or something like that is very helpful for those individuals, because it gives them a better idea of what exactly the public is looking for through that document.
Thank you. I have kind of a follow-up question, kind of like something that spurs off of that. It's also been quite a while since our zoning code was updated. Are there plans to update the zoning code to kind of bring it a little more in line with the comprehensive plan and maybe update the vision of the city?
Yeah, and that's something that I think we're still talking through the administration with. Obviously we'll be losing a staff member on the current budget. And I think, we're able to handle a lot of most of, if not all of the day-to-day stuff we need to do and some of the future planning stuff. But a project of that nature is going to be a little bit more intensive, and, we might want to look at contracting that out, because for something like a zoning code especially, you may want to have a lawyer look at it to make sure it's in compliance with various regulations and stuff like that. And that's something that our law bureau is really, as they've kind of testified today, very already kind of have a lot on their plates. So it's definitely something we're discussing with the administration, and it's a logical next step after the comprehensive plan.
All right, any idea on a timeline on which that might be looked at, being started, let alone completed?
I don't have a timeline at the moment, but it's something we can get to you guys.
Okay, that would be appreciated, because I don't think it's budgeted for in this budget. So that will be looking at least 2023. So I know that's something it's pretty important to get updated as soon as possible. So I'd like to see that as a priority. And then just one more question for myself before I open it back up to my colleagues. I know Council President Bowers really spearheaded the affordable housing package. And I just want to know, is this something that you are knowledgeable of? And is this something that you inform applicants of when they're looking to do housing projects, so that by the time they get to council, they are aware of it and maybe have looked a little more into it and are most likely more willing to take part in it?
Absolutely. It's something we discuss with potential applicants for new, especially residential developments. Obviously there's a significant zoning component there. So we kind of cover the affordable housing legislation through that, what bonuses it gives you, things of that nature. And we kind of lead them into the certification process that I think is still getting stood up a little bit because nobody, I don't think, has come through, formally gone through that whole process and certified their affordability and, gotten that whole process done. So, we've taken them as far as we can kind of lead them as far as that process has gone. But we actually have the first project that is going to be applying under that program that's going to be heard, I believe, at the upcoming zoning hearing board meeting. I believe it was down on Sycamore Street. So they'll be the first one where we've had discussions with them. Like we've had discussions with multiple developers, and some of them, I think, kind of go, okay, well, we'll think about it, and we don't hear from them again. Or maybe they're just putting everything together they need to get it before. This is the first one that said, yes, I'm doing this. Yes, I'm moving forward through the review process. And here's my application.
That is great news. Thank you for that updated information. I will open it back up to my colleagues for any questions for the Bureau of Planning.
I have a question.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you for being here tonight, Mr. Knight. We recently just, we will be requiring a firm to come and educate us on what the do's and don'ts basically of the ARP funding. They kind of gave us their word that they would reach out and find out more about the comprehensive plan and the demographic they intend to assist. Have they done that? Have their office done that?
I don't believe I've had somebody reach out so far about discussing how the ARP funds would work with the comprehensive plan.
Okay. Well, I guess not the ARP fund specifically, just the comprehensive plan to learn more about the area. It was brought up in the meeting when we spoke with them during the hearing. So I just wanted to kind of check some balances, crossing T's, dotting I's, just for our information.
I don't believe I have, but I'll be happy to notify council when they do reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you.
A copy was shared with them.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Are there any other questions from my colleagues for the Bureau of Planning? Councilman Rouse?
Thank you. I was wondering, I was looking at the budget and there is $15,000, sorry, for advertisement, which went up from last year, which was 12,000, but it's been going up steadily since 2019, which we started at 7,000, about 7,400. Can you give me a breakdown on what you're using for advertising, what kind of advertising you're doing? Is it you? Is it a consulting company or whatnot? Can you just give us a breakdown of what that advertisement looks like?
Yeah, so basically our budget is broken out into basically two things. It's staff and then things for zoning hearing board. So that is our legal line item is for the zoning hearing board solicitor. The stenographer is for that meeting as well. And then the advertising is for that. And that's has to be in a paper of public record that's, I think, has certain publishing requirements, like it needs to be done once a week or something like that per the MPC, I believe. And so we use Penn Live for that. Or the Patriot News, yeah.
So you're saying you use Penn Live and the Patriot News to advertise
Our zoning hearing board meetings,
your
yes,
zoning
correct.
hearing board meeting.
And occasionally some other things as well. If there's a street vacation, for example, we'll advertise that as well.
Okay, so you've been using the same system or the same way to advertise for the past 4 years?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Right, so why did it go up? Why did it go up in the budget if you're just using the same ways that you're advertising?
Because costs are going up based on what Patriot News charges and based on the length of our agendas. Like longer agendas cost more to print. And, I think we've been seeing more development recently than maybe we had in the past. So between those two factors, we're just making sure that we have the money to be able to pay for our advertisements, because last thing we want to do is, get to like November and not be able to advertise the meeting for that month, because then we would not be able to have it. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the Bureau of Planning? Seeing none, thank you, Director Knight. It's been wonderful working with you, and I look forward to continuing the work.
Thank you. Me too.
I believe that was the last bureau, or
I have a follow-up
that's
question.
what I was gonna ask. Does anyone have any other questions for the administration or for anyone that we spoke with tonight? I'll start with Council President.
Thank you, Vice President Green. Yes, my follow-up question is for Ms. Willingham, please. Thank you. It was really spurred by the discussion with Mr. Knight about vacancies movement. I think we've seen last night and tonight and last year a mass exit of employees, and we're filling the vacancies. I get it. Does HR conduct exit interviews?
Yes, but it's voluntary.
Oh, it's.
I mean, we
not-
meet with them and we give them a form
Okay.
and they can voluntarily fill it out and turn it back in. They do not have to put their name on it. And out of all the ones I did last year, towards the end of the year, I got 2 back.
I was gonna ask you, what percentage do you receive back?
Very little. A lot of them will give verbal comments,
Okay.
but do not want to put anything in writing.
Is the verbal commentary productive?
Sometimes, yes, it helps, me, and I make notes, but majority of the time it's just like, oh, it's time for me to move on. I found a better opportunity. I'm just leaving the state. Majority of them do not want to put anything in writing and really do not want to say anything.
Last question, comments. Have the employees completed a performance evaluation for last year?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
but I don't think you have that. It was done prior to the new administration coming in.
I thought so. I just wanted to make sure that it was.
It was the way the past administration did it. It was always done between July and August.
Okay.
And in preparation for the upcoming budget.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a follow-up for HR. I understand, according to President Bauer's question, there is an exit process that you go through and try to reach out the whys. Is there anything for new hires that is similar? So like a follow-up for a new hire? Hey, how are we doing? Is there anything you have concerns about that may help with the retention?
It's something we could put in place, but no, at this time, we do not do that.
Thank you.
I will mention an onboarding survey, once that's completed, it's probably a good idea to put through. So we'll definitely look at doing something like that very soon.
Okay.
I just have one follow-up comment, which is that you may want to look at an electronic survey, perhaps, maybe an email survey where they might feel a little more comfortable that it's anonymous to put their comments on. And it might also just make it easier for your bureau, such as like a Survey Monkey.
Okay, yeah, we could do something like that, but we also understand that none of the public works employees that leave, majority of them do not have access to our email. So.
Interesting.
They still demand the paper stubs from the paychecks, and we're trying to move into where we don't have to do that with the new system coming in, and they're hesitant.
Okay, that is good information to know.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any further questions?
Well, yeah, really quick. I know you said there was a lot of the employees don't have the electron, they still want the paper checks. They don't have the email. Is it because, or do you know, is it because, is it a language barrier or is it an educational barrier, such as like with my parents, they wouldn't do direct deposit for years because they thought in their world, how they grew up, someone's going to take my money. Like, I don't want it to electronically go anywhere. And I had to teach them and show them, no, direct deposit is okay. So is it a language barrier, educational barrier in that sense?
The public works employees do not have access to email because their jobs do not require it. As far as the pay stubs with paychecks, our employees can set up an account and access their W-2s, they're in their pay stubs. They still call us on the phone and say, could you please mail this out to me, or can I come by and pick it up? I guess it's just a lot of them have been there for years, and this is the process they understand, and they want it to stay that way.
Change is hard.
It is something, for some people, it's difficult. Some of the younger ones have no issue with going on paychecks, but the last time I talked to the payroll manager, it is used very little.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I appreciate the responses. Are there any other comments or questions regarding anything we went over tonight or in general for the administration before we end the night?
I did have one. For Ms. Kelly, I was wondering, I know earlier you had spoke of, I think we were asking about a line that was in the budget, and you were saying that it wasn't clear because you were using many years the way the budget's been laid out, like the programming. So I was wondering, is there going to be an update on the programming, or more so what like financial electronic system does the city use?
Well, I can tell you, if we move to a new ERP, the problems will be solved, because we'll have much better flexibility, much better opportunity. It'll be part of an integrated system, not this piece here, that piece there, this piece there. So that's our goal. I know Steve's just painstakingly for the last 3 years that I've been involved with this piece, really worked hard to try to find kind of the best in the business. So these two firms are pretty much the best in the business. So we're hoping that the combination of a new ERP system, a new general ledger management system, and moving away from Panamation, which is, it has its pluses and minuses, of course. But I've worked with other cities who have moved away from Panamation and into one of those two systems, and it's been very successful. So not to pick on Panamation, because they're a good product, but our version is kind of right. And Brian, you might have better input because you're in the trenches in it every day. I'm relatively new, but I've worked with other systems throughout the many years of my career.
Myself, I'm looking forward to a change in that, well, not just the accounting system, but as everybody is the mainframe and its various sub packages. E-finance or Panamation, it's served the city over the years for quite a while, but I think it's somewhat antiquated as far as producing the information in the most efficient and meaningful way. So I'm hopeful that what the potential is with what's coming will be a more streamlined. Marina mentioned integration. I think that's the key to improve communication among all staff that use the system for review and approval processes, and more detail in the reports. I'm hopeful on the revenue side will be a big enhancement for the city.
Okay, good. I think we all look forward to that.
Very good question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for the administration or anyone else that we spoke with tonight? Seeing none, thank you. I will conclude this portion of the budget hearing and send it back over to Council President Bowers.
Thank you, Vice President Green. At this time, we will open the floor for public comment. Is there anyone to my right who would like to offer public comment? Seeing no one, anyone in the middle section that would like to offer public comment?
Good evening, council members. Laura Harding, Uptown Harrisburg. First, I'd like to commend everyone on this council. The questions tonight were excellent all around. It's been really helpful. You answered a lot of my questions for me already, and it's refreshing to see. So first of all, my first comment is about the CSAs. I would like to not see those additional positions filled for the reasons that President Bowers stated, and also because they said that these positions are not being utilized in a mental health background or capacity, which was what I and much of the public thought that they would be used for. And I think it was Captain Hooper who said that that's a role that CIT is filling, but that's not funded for 2022. It was $100,000 was funded in 2021, but there's nothing, it's unfunded in 2022. So it seems as if CSAs are being used to fill gaps in police services. They're just sent here and there to do traffic things, and that's not what, I don't think that's what we should be paying for. I think we should fund traffic enforcement people to fill those roles. Additionally,
Just before we move on, I would like to note that the co-responders are funded. They're just funded in a different line.
Through the
Because
county.
Because it's
Okay.
being sent to the county. So they are funded. It's just budgeted. It's just in a different line item than it was.
Thank you.
okay, well, I would rather we increase that funding than fund more CSAs. I think we have the need, the public wants a different role than the traditional law enforcement role to meet the needs of the community in this capacity. On page 29, I would really like to see city council add funding to hire their own solicitor and not rely on the administration solicitor to answer their legal questions. Really would like to see that. I'm a little bit, I don't know if this, I apologize if this question was already answered, but are the controller and treasurer positions part-time? Because why are they are, okay. Because the deputies are paid more than them, so that's really my question.
They're part-time elected.
And on page 81, they're proposing to double the number of police captains from 2 to 4. But the proposed budget only increases from 389,000 to 423,000, but they're doubling the number of positions. Again, I apologize if that question was already answered and I missed it.
I do think Captain Hooper did allude to that there were new positions in the past year like his that were created for community services. So I think those were moves that were made last year in the middle of going through the year, if I'm correct.
Just if there could just be some clarification before the budget is approved. And so this was asked by Shemaine before she left, Councilwoman Daniels. But the really should have funding somewhere for multilingual services for interpretation or interpreters, because if the federal law says that if you have accepted, a municipality has accepted federal funding, then they are required by law to have a language access plan. The city needs to have its own language access plan. And I mentioned the regulations, which you can look at on lep.gov, and the state also has its own language access plan. With respect to the questions around reorganization, it does appear a lot throughout this budget that there is a lot of reorganizing that is occurring. And those are with the Office of the Mayor. It says Special Assistant for Community Affairs, and then Director of Equity and Compliance is a $90,000 position. But then there is the Office of Social Equity and Affirmative Action, and that has a director and secretary positions of $60,000. And so are are they proposing to eliminate those positions then? And are they reorganizing in the office of the mayor? And also the procurement services, the Bureau of Financial Management has a procurement services and compliance manager. So I'm just unclear on what the director of equity and compliance is. So if there could be some clarification on that, because it does appear to be a reorganization.
That role is dealing with MBE Enterprises, where the compliance from Hillary's side and is more from purchasing and documentation on our side. The role in the mayor's office is more of an external facing, but also some internal, where Hillary's is compliance on our own documentation for purchase orders and different things like that.
Well, why aren't you funding the Office of Social Equity and Affirmative Action then? Like, because that, like, I mean, the line of questioning here tonight was, you know, what is the diversity makeup of every office? And we should have them doing that. And
Even
ensuring
Akima
that-
Agbaugh in the city solicitor's office is handling those issues as an attorney.
Well, they're not, because they're not ensuring that we have
He
interpreters.
just started 2 weeks ago.
We have a new person?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's who you're talking about.
He's handling it as an
Okay.
attorney.
Okay, okay. All right, well, can we have some clarification or clear up because it is then like a reorganization.
Language access plan, I will add, is something that the mayor has had discussions with. Melissa is already starting to work with the different departments to translate all forms. So it's not giving them a form in English and then having a translator over the phone do it. So to meet the spirit of the law, they are starting with Spanish, and the mayor has asked for other languages such as Nepalese, Vietnamese, and a number of others to be satisfied based off of what the statistics show we need to do.
The resident that came to the zoning hearing board meeting as a neighbor was not a Spanish speaker. It was another language. So that needs to be clear that we have to have people lined up who speak other languages other than Spanish.
There is a percentage threshold that you have to hit, and the mayor has made that a commitment to work towards getting that to that level. Those issues with those boards, those are services as independent boards. They're going to have to advertise those services like Jeff had talked about through the planning bureau budget. But that's something definitely as we do build out next year's budget, we can work that through the process. We're looking at starting that budget schedule within the next 60 days. So those are conversations we can have, and we can price out those sort of things for all those individual boards. So it would be built in and priced into all of these budgets.
Okay. So on that note, with the comments about the reorganization, there does seem, even with these answers, it does seem to be that there is some type of reorganizing occurring. And I would just like to draw attention to the fact that former President Williams, current Mayor Williams, made comments with respect to the Director of Economic Development in 2015 at that meeting when that was being funded, that the third class city code requires adoption of ordinance to reorganize these departments, and Solicitor Grover did not contradict her. So I believe that there needs to be some ordinances written before and passed before this budget is passed. If it proceeds as written without clarifying the roles in these departments. And specifically, I think that the Parks, Rec, and Facilities Department roles are very confusing. Like the Facilities Director is a part-time position on one page under one bureau at $45,000, but then on another, it's $25,000, 25% at $45,000, which is $90,000, but that's only 75% work. So it's just there, and there seems to be some overlapping jobs, and how do you determine what percentage somebody is working on one job and not the other.
That's dates back to the prior administration, and it's taking a lot of work for us, and that's part of the confusion and problem with this in untangling a lot of that data and information and how things got to be the way they are through neighborhood services and general fund.
I also would like to state for the record that Ms. Rebecca Vollmer needs a 30% raise for the amount of work that she is doing. And she is filling a director position and she is grossly underpaid. We just sat and listened to how the communications director job needs to be competitive. Do you know how much grant writers get paid outside of municipal government? Seriously, she needs a raise and it needs to be at least 30%. I mean, this is something that we women know. If you are a high-performing woman in your job and you are very good at your job, you're taken advantage of. It's shameful that she is not paid more. So, my other questions were answered, and just to hinging on that more, the codes department is really the most poorly run department, except I'm accepting the women who work behind the desk because they're awesome. Everyone else, I don't know what they do. I don't even know their job description. But the codes director asked for an office manager, and Ms. Vollmer doesn't have anybody helping her. So I would say scratch the office manager because that seems to be the codes administrator's job, is to run the office, and give Ms. Vollmer a raise. Thank you.
That position is not funded.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the middle section that would like to offer public comment? Seeing no one, anyone to my left? Thank you. Just wanted to note that Harrisburg City Council will host a special legislative session tomorrow, Thursday, February 10th, 2022 at 5:15 p.m. Immediately following the special legislative session, we will host our third budget hearing beginning at 5:30 p.m. Time is 9:21. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Is it okay? I didn't introduce us.